And welcome back, everyone, to the Security Day, or to those who didn't join the workshop earlier, welcome to Security Day. Before we go on to the next speaker of the day, just a quick reminder for the interaction in the chat. You can use it to your right. If you got some questions, ask them by the ask button, the big blue one that is beneath the chat. But during the interactions, please be nice to each other and respect each other, as we have a code of conduct. Here's a short video about it. And now let's start with the speaker. He is security engineer at Bosch Engineering Österreich, has a master's degree in telecommunications with a focus on network security, and as he has worked on a variety of products regarding the security concepts, he for sure knows what he's talking about. Welcome, Davor.
Hi, thank you for inviting me for talking today. Yeah, I'm happy to represent Bosch Engineering today. So you may know Bosch from washing machines or power tools. So today I'll talk about the automotive side.
Okay, very interesting, Davor. And then I would say, without further ado, stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, welcome to the talk. So a little bit about me, maybe for the beginning. As I was already introduced, I'm working as a security engineer and security manager at Bosch Engineering in Austria, based in Vienna. And yeah, so basically we're looking into doing the security in our products right. I'm also part of the product vulnerability and incidents response team. So anything regarding vulnerabilities or incidents in our products lands in our team. And yeah, we handle that. So yeah, I joined at Bosch in the year 2018. So yeah, been through different projects on the engineering side and also on this concept side. Yeah, today I want to take you on a road trip. So as you've seen, maybe in the introduction text already, I like bad puns. And for the beginning, I wanted to ask this basic question: what is a supplier? What do I understand under the term supplier? Bosch is the Bosch Group is quite a big company, and we are a part of it. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. In the second item, I will give you a short overview about automotive security. You might be familiar with some topics. Here I want to introduce some concepts. Then the big part, the third part, is the big road trip. So there are many short stops. Yeah, so maybe a lot to take in. That's because there are so many future challenges for automotive security. Some of them are smaller, some of them bigger. And yeah, so I'll take you through there. In the end, we'll get through some takeaways, show you some info about us, and yeah, we will have a chance for a Q&A session in the end. So what is an automotive supplier? Here we have the example Bosch Engineering. So Bosch is quite big, and we are in a sub-department or in a business unit of Bosch, and we're looking into those different topics you can see on the slide. So we are working on passenger cars, of course, on commercial vehicles, but also some applications in rail, in aviation, industrial, and off-highway. So, and also, of course, the power sports and the motorsports. So everything with 4 or 2 wheels, which goes fast, basically. This can be further split up, and I know this is a big slide, but it's just to illustrate what we are doing for the mobility part. This can be split up into different systems and services we provide. So from the powertrain, combustion and in the direction of combustion, but also electrical, connected services, ADAS systems, supporting systems in the car. So the whole, the whole thing basically, up to EE architectures for the whole car. So also conceptual work, where we work together with OEMs, so car manufacturers, and we provide some concepts for the whole vehicle system. And of course, for me, for my teams, cybersecurity is the main focus here. So in all of those topics, there's always a little or a bit of cybersecurity, or a lot of it, of course, depending on what the item is or what the component is. And just to give you an overview of our business unit, or of our part of Bosch. So we belong to Bosch 100%. Worldwide, there are about 3,000 associates in 8 countries and 14 locations. One of them is here in Vienna, and the main location is in the Stuttgart area in Abstadt in Germany. So as I've said, we are doing from 0 to electrical to 24 cylinders, and also from batch size of 1. So we are doing prototypes, we are doing tailored applications and tailored components for different customers. Of course, Bosch also has a big history of motorsports, which is also part of our company. And the estimate is that we are doing about 800 plus customer projects per year. So again, all of these things have some impact in security. For instance, for prototypes, we will have a tailored approach. And of course, there are some special requirements and some special needs for our different products. Good. So let me give you an overview in automotive security. So if you have heard one talk about automotive security, this might be familiar to you. So the big topic in cars is that there's an increase in attack surface. So you can imagine the cars were initially not intended to be connected anywhere. Those were just offline devices basically, or systems. And right now, more and more features are coming in. As you know, autonomous driving is a big topic, but I'll talk about that in the third chapter. So there can be safety impacts, of course, when you drive with 2 tons of metal around. A lot can happen with high speeds. And data breaches, because as you know, a car is a very personal item often. It records stuff, so it knows a lot about you, even, I don't know, your heart rate or your weight or something like that. So all of those data is collected. Yeah, and there's growing relevance also in the industry. There are more and more standards, more and more regulations, and of course this gives some pressure or some initiative in the industry that things have to happen, of course. So again, just giving you a short overview, there are different types of attacks. So many things you may know from classical IT, but of course it takes a different form in automotive. So you have some outside connectivity, you have some connectivity on the vehicle, inside of the vehicle. So you can imagine access to the vehicle is a very big part of the security analysis here. And of course, here we have to adapt to see, okay, more connectivity has to be considered, but also the physical attacks must be analyzed and must be considered here. So basically an attacker could have different motivations, one of them being stealing a car, of course, reading data, hijacking the vehicle, I don't know, driving circles with your car if it's funny, of course. You can imagine that you can do a lot, and it can be a quite attractive attack there. Yeah. So just an overview, what we as a supplier do. We are also involved at the pre-development stages. So we also do security concepts for OEMs, so that their concept is, we support with concepts. You can imagine with a batch size of 1 and with the emerging startups and companies which are producing new cars, they need some kind of consulting to figure out, okay, how does this work, or which things in security I have to watch out for. So here we are working together with different car manufacturers. And of course, so that's the one part. And of course, we offer some components. And those components have to be tailored in regards of security. You can imagine there are different security concepts for key management, for different security features which are needed. And basically, that's also my job to figure this out and set up requirements. Security testing is also part, of course, where we work also together with partners who are doing the security testing for us, of course, to have an independent test also for the components we are offering. And a big part, or a developing part here, is also the post-SOP cybersecurity. So anything which happens in the field or vulnerabilities which are found have to be analyzed, have to be evaluated, and depending on the analysis, some actions have to be taken. And also things from classical IT, like intrusion detection systems and VSOCs, so vehicle security operation centers, those are also on the rise to fulfill those monitoring needs. We do training, we do consulting, we support our OEMs. So that's basically what we do. In automotive security, as I've said, if you heard one talk, you've for sure heard about the GPAC. So that's like the best example, or the earliest example, where a complete analysis was done from front to back to control a vehicle, which also had big impact, like this big recall. So this we see in 2015 in the middle here. But even before that, security was kind of a topic, because you can imagine tuning was done in the late 80s, and this competition started, of course. Okay, you don't want somebody to manipulate your electronic control units because they could do some damage, like unintended damage. If you have more horsepower on the engine, this could have the consequence, for instance, that something happens to the car which you wouldn't expect. And here this race started, basically, or this road trip. And the next thing was actually not a security feature, but more of an anti-theft feature, the immobilizer, which became mandatory for many countries. And in the 2000s, then it started with connecting cars with Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, SIM cards, and it was never intended. So the E-architecture was never really designed for any of those connectivity features. And you can imagine there was a wake-up call, this GPAC, and after that, the gates opened and many security researchers focused on that. So yeah, there are many papers, many conferences about that. DEF CON has a car hacking village. So yeah, so it's a very interesting time to be in this topic, of course. And also soon, we will have fully self-driving cars, whenever that is, but we will have some new challenges connected with that. So security architectures, security features have to be adapted. Right. I took a few examples which are currently in the media or relevant. So Automotive fraud is one of those things, or one of those use cases for attackers or attack scenarios. Of course, when you want to sell a car, you can change the kilometers and it looks like a newer car than it is. This is, of course, illegal. Don't do that. But yeah, there was an analysis from the German ADAC. They showed that, yeah, this happens, and depends on the car model, of course. But yeah. Another thing which is very current is from two security researchers, Ken Tyndall and Ian Tabor. So as with the GPAC, they used what they have at home, basically. So they had this car, which was stolen. But days before, they noticed, okay, somebody is manipulating the car, like this bumper was taken down. It's just, they didn't know what's happening, right? They thought, okay, somebody is just playing tricks, or I don't know, trying to break his car or something like that. But actually it turned out that this was intentional, that a few days later the car was gone, and on the app he could see that it's moving. Basically what happened is, and now of course they wanted to research that, since they are in automotive security. They wanted to know what happened, and they found out that there are commercially available emergency starters for cars, which look like a Bluetooth speaker. So, right, the title is emergency starter, but actually it's a device which can be maliciously used. And what this device basically does is it manipulates the CAN bus. So when you take down this front of the car, you see some wires and you plug it in, and then in the internal vehicle bus, you can address the components which are relevant for starting the car and opening the car. So you've basically faked the messages. So you have some physical access from the outside, You just pull down this plastic part and you have direct access to the bus. And of course, they did some fancy CAN manipulation stuff also, where they have suppressed the messages from other ECUs with a physical attack on the CAN bus. And the other ECUs could not send messages anymore on the bus, and this device was dominant there. Yeah. So another example, which I like personally like a lot, because it's also done only over the CAN bus, and it has arbitrary code execution in the exploit. So basically, two security researchers again had in their daily job, they had a case, and they really wanted to show, okay, what can be done, because the customer didn't trust them or didn't believe them that this is a big thing, and they went all the way to run their own code on the device without changing anything beforehand on the device, meaning that strictly over the CAN bus with manipulated messages, they could produce valid output like blinking the screen or manipulating functions. You can imagine if you're driving on the motorway, when your screen starts blinking, you could be distracted. This can have some impact. And what they're showing is that this kind of this bare metal device, this embedded device, so initial code execution they didn't deem that complex, but later to have a backdoor, to have some stable execution, was very complex because they had to put in a lot of they had to research a lot about the device and the hardware to be able to do that. So yeah, that was quite interesting. Usually the CAN bus is it's a limited interface, and it's not that usual that you see something like that. Right. So now the real road trip starts, and I will show you the challenges which we're facing. As I've said, some of them are big, some of them are smaller, but let's start right in. So to again compare it to classical IT, you can imagine that the hardware development cycles are quite big. So you have longer hardware development cycles and also software development cycles to get the product out, and also new hardware generations introduce more time into that. So that has to be considered when you bring out security features, for instance, because you could have some limited resources there, especially when you have some legacy device. You have longer life cycles, so it's not like a cell phone, which is outdated in 2 to 5 years. So we're talking 15 years or more, and the components have to be future-proof. So you cannot just do it like on the limit and push it out. You have to really take care that you support this product for this time frame, depending on what you agree with the customer, of course. Yeah. Also for certain devices, that's not true for all of them, but for certain devices, you have some time requirements, like boot up times, like latency for messages, for instance. I'll have on the latest slide a few points for that. And of course, updates. For updates, you have to have some headroom for updates. And of course, you have to track for vulnerabilities, and you have to preserve the build chain that you're able to do it also in 10 years. And yeah, also for that, I will have some more info. So hardware limitations, that's a big thing for some of the devices, as you can imagine. I have a few examples here. Secure onboard communication. So basically, with that, we are adding some CMAX to the messages. So if you want to really simplify it, it's cryptographic checksums. It's not the right term, but you can imagine it like that. So CMAX on the messages, where, of course, you have some overhead for every message generated, and you can, if you have hundreds of messages, you need also either hundreds of key slots or a good key concept, which groups of keys you have or something like that. And of course, added latency. So you have some hardware security module usually, and of course the whole interface communication takes time. You have some scheduling optimizations you have to take maybe. So this can be quite challenging also if you have strict time requirements. Secure boot. You can imagine you sit in the car, or you plug in your key, or just press the button actually, and you don't want to wait for 2, 5, 10 seconds until the engine starts or the car can drive. You want to have this instant reaction, and of course, secure boot, depending on the device, takes some time. And even if it's just a few milliseconds or seconds, this can be quite a big impact for the user experience. And yeah, security updates. One special point here is if you have a hardware security module with an own operating system, that's an additional challenge to also have this updatable. So you need some updating concepts also for that. Right. So a few words to onboard communication. I like this example a lot because, yeah, I've been in a project where I went deeper into that topic. But basically, you have this MEC generation with 2 components. And the main message is here, you have multiple suppliers and participants who contribute to the whole system. And the car manufacturer, and you can imagine if you have, like, let's say 5 parties, and you have a bug on the car, an error message on the car, then it gets very tricky to debug this, to find a solution for that. So which component is it, which is making trouble? Or if I have some other time requirements, like I need some torque applied to some part in the powertrain, this has to happen sometimes if in sports cars inside of 100 milliseconds. And you don't have, so every millisecond counts basically, and you can imagine that this can be quite a challenge. So you could also have some, due to the latency, you could have some unintended errors, and yeah, so that's the complexity here. Also, here I have a picture from the AUTOSAR standard. Here you also see the technology stack, or the communication stack here, how this works. So up there in the right upper corner, you have the freshness handling. So this also has to be introduced either in the base software, in the so-called base software below this runtime environment, or in the application software. And you can imagine over different stacks, over different components, that you also have some complexity there to really have a smooth calculation of those values. Yeah, so, and a big part here is also that this is OEM specific. So you have a standard which gives some ideas, but in the end, it's the car manufacturer which decides on the concept, and this has to be done also to their specifications. Also, an interesting topic is glitching, hardware glitching. You can imagine this is very hard to protect against if you don't have it already in hardware, some protections. And there are some software hardening measures. It can be quite challenging to do those fault injections. So you can have multiple layers there of protection. Basically, what an attacker wants to do here is to reverse engineer the software to steal intellectual property, for instance, or prepare for a remote attack, because they can dump the software, find exploits locally, or if there are fleet keys, which they shouldn't be there, you should have individual keys. But if there were, you could also use this for a scaling attack. So you have some keys extracted, which you can use on other devices which are not manipulated. Yeah, so that's quite an interesting topic. It's also a developing topic. So yeah. So the next thing here, we're jumping again. We are zooming out from the component and going into the architecture. Basically, the trend right now is for the network architectures that we will have less controllers, less ECUs, but the complexity will rise. So we will have less ECUs, which are more powerful and take care of more features. So maybe some examples in industry where this is already happening. So this is the general trend to sum up those devices and have less but more powerful devices. And to support this move, of course, sorry for the wall of text. This was intentional, just to give you like this impression. You have different technologies, different operating systems which are introduced. So the trend is to containerization, that you have Dockerized components, hypervisors, of course, the newer or the more modern in-vehicle communication protocols like Automotive Ethernet, connectivity technologies like 5G, and of course, nomadic functions, which can move from one ECU to the other, like you just have software and you put it somewhere and it just works, ideally. Also, the operating systems are interesting in a way that some OEMs are starting their own proprietary operating systems. Often they are Linux-based, so that's an interesting development. So the idea here is, of course, to also save costs and also have one consistent operating system. Yeah, so since you are probably dealing with security, you might know Mikko Hyppönen, a security researcher, very famous one from F-Secure. So this is kind of this unofficial law that whenever an appliance is described as being smart, it's vulnerable. And I argue that the smarter it gets, the more vulnerable it will get. And you have seen the wall of text, all those different technologies. It's different to 10 years ago, of course. And we can, this will change, of course, the threat landscape. One good parameter or one good consideration here is vulnerabilities per lines of code. There are some papers about that. So basically, it depends on the programming language. It depends on the application. If it's sandboxed or if it's like really on the drivers. And also an important factor here is that you need programmer expertise and training, so that especially on those security relevant parts, the classic errors don't happen, that the static analysis is done right, static code analysis, and also this goes into the end product, how many vulnerabilities per lines of code there are. Like recently, we've seen also on VirusTotal that there are some AI-supported analysis tools for malware. So you just plug in something and it tells you what it does. So this may be also a topic for automotive security, so that you just counter check it. Okay, tell me what this code does, and to see, of course, with a programmer to see, okay, does this make sense? Is this really a vulnerability? Right. So the complexity also in the tech stack brings some new threats in. So this is not new, of course, but ransomware could be a real thing on cars. Let's see when the first case happens. So basically, the scenario is you have a car at home, and a attacker finds a good way to scale the attack to reach many cars. And in the morning, you sit in the car and you cannot start because it asks you to pay some smaller amount or big amount so that you can use a car again. And with smarter cars, I would argue that this will be easier to do. And yeah, so we're looking into solutions, and for every problem we solve with security features and like the usual methods, we earn a new problem, a key management problem. And again, if you work in security, that's nothing new for you. It's just that the boundary conditions are different here. So you have a production system, a key management system, so PKI basically, and you have, of course, this cooperation with the car manufacturer where you have to come together and exchange keys. And of course, there's different use cases. The car manufacturer wants to have diagnostic testers. You have to bring those in somehow, bring in interfaces. The vehicle fleet wants to update certificates, maybe. So you can imagine this can be very complex, and key management will always remain a big component of future challenges for suppliers and also car manufacturers, and in the cooperation too, of course. Yeah, so also a big thing here is the updating part, which I've mentioned earlier. You have many limitations like bandwidth limits, end of life for products. You have lifetimes from a PKI system. You have to watch out, okay, if the certificates run out, then you have a problem. And have a fleet you cannot update. This should not happen, of course. And of course, the question is, okay, if you have a long lifetime, how do you sell the new components? Of course, for some suppliers, this might be an issue. And very big part of it here is, and you can see it in the right lower picture, just a tweet I have copied. It has some impact on the customer convenience, on the user convenience. So if you start your car again and it's bricked because something went wrong with the update, then you can imagine this will be very, yeah, you wouldn't like this car and you would be very unhappy. And in the upper picture, you can see with the GPAC, updating was really done with USB sticks, which were sent out for the recall. So you can imagine the paperwork, the USB sticks, everything. So this was a big pain point, and of course, big motivation to not let this happen again. And when we talk about 15 years of supplying a software, so you freeze a version and you support the customer, car manufacturer, with updates, it's not trivial to preserve the software, the build chain. So you can imagine if you have some old SVN repository from 15 years ago, imagine, could you run it without any problems on some old hardware or some newer hardware? And yeah, you can imagine this could go right. Okay, it's fine, but as a supplier, you cannot take the chance. You have to really put in the effort to preserve the software, to make sure that your business model for updates still works, and of course that the security is ensured for future products. Right, so updating. Connected to that is maybe also legislation for the right to repair. There are some security implications there, and if somebody at home wants to update ECU component in the car, of course, this can be locked down, that you're not just easily able to take the component and put another one in. You have some keys on there, you have some vehicle-specific keys, and you need some interfaces, as if, of course, when the lawmaker also tells you have to enable this, you have to give some access to the key management service or some kind of web tools or tools to do that. And of course, the documentation for that. And of course, mainly the car makers are addressed here, but as a supplier, we have to work together to find solutions for that, so that those regulations can be fulfilled, of course. And at the same time, we have to ensure that that there are no new threats and no new threat models, because if you open up a door, of course, an interface to an end user, for instance, for data access, for telematics, which is a topic, then you also have to think about, okay, if that's possible, how do I protect it from unintended access? So could this be misused? Of course. So right to repair, also a big topic. And that's the next topic is quantum cryptography. That's maybe sounds a little buzzwordy, but actually we have to take care that we look into it right now, because the estimations right now are that in few years time, so I don't have a time scale here, but that some cryptographic primitives will be broken. And if you keep in mind the life cycles of those products we're selling and how long we have to support them, you can imagine that's a big problem. So this slide is, or this picture is from the Bosch research blog, so you can look it up. It's easy to find on Google. So they have some arguments, okay, we have to start now, or we have to evaluate when to start introducing new cryptographic algorithms. And of course, we are relying a lot on the hardware acceleration. And again, with the topic, you cannot just bring it in software, maybe. You have to watch out. You need to include the chip manufacturers. And right now, with the standardizing, of course, so which, like the NIST standardizing of the algorithms, you have to also track it, okay, what will be like the go-to algorithms like we have right now. And of course, the question is, can we update legacy components? We have to think about all of that. And maybe, so that's also part of the evaluation, maybe this will not be such a big problem, not such a big problem fast, or it will be a very big problem where the technology is widely misused or used. So that's also something on the radar as a future challenge. One challenge we have also are penetration tests, bug bounties. So the industry is getting bigger and bigger. Maybe Pwn to Own. So that's very popular because Tesla is offering always some bug bounties there. And in general, we need also as a supplier, we need those partners, those competent partners to analyze or to test our devices, because we also of course want to have good quality penetration tests. And of course, when there's some competition in the industry, it will be also easier to find different partners also that you can change through, and we have a lot of components, of course, in projects which will be relevant for that. Right. So a more boring topic maybe are regulations and standards, but I find them very good actually, because it's putting some pressure on the industry that security is getting a more important topic. So now, of course, certification for the ISO 21434 is happening. That's the automotive security standard. And basically, it's not telling you, the standard is not telling you which features you have to take. It's telling you how you have to do your analysis, like the methodology. And that's why I've included this meme. So, of course, the product can still have vulnerabilities, even if it's certified. But the standard also tells you, okay, in case of an vulnerability, you have to do those steps. Basically, vulnerabilities are daily business, as I've mentioned earlier. If you have more lines of code, if you have more complex products, of course, will have to deal with more of those. Just an overview, just a quick overview. On the left side, you can see what the tier 1 to 3 suppliers do. And on the right side, you can see the regulation, the UNEC R155, which is relevant for the car manufacturers. And of course, we have to bring those ends together so that also the car manufacturer can apply for vehicle type approval. So there's a homologation process, and they have to prove that they are doing everything regarding this cybersecurity management system. So they have to show, okay, we have something in place for vulnerabilities. We have the processes in place. We have the risk assessment in place. So we know why we are using the security features and the security controls. So basically, as a supplier, we have to support this for vehicles. A part of it, which is also relating to car manufacturers, but we are supporting as with our knowledge and our consulting, is protecting whole system architecture. And of course, since we have a lot of experience with the components, we can bring in more for this holistic system architecture. So we're working on methodologies to bring the component level with the system level together. And of course, you have to consider different things also, like the general architecture and safety, of course. For that, we also develop our own tools. So if we have seen that in the industry, we're missing some things which fit the use case. And of course, part of our methodology is to also support this with some good tools. All right. Vulnerabilities, we have to have something in place to cover that. And we have a central P-cert for also for contacting. So if you ever come in contact with some Bosch product which you think that there's a vulnerability, you can contact us through the responsible disclosure policy. So for our products, of course, we have some different methods in place, some different tools, and that's a thing which never stops. So of course, we have to take special care of the proprietary stuff we're doing, the proprietary software, and connect this, of course, with the open source software which is used in some products. And of course, one biggie is the autonomous driving. As you can imagine, with all before mentioned, the complexity is big. It's an attractive target. You may have some features to like have some emergency control of the car. So depending on what develops there, you can imagine that there are new threat models there. And of course, there are some manipulations, like if you manipulate road signs, So is this actually security or is it safety? And the answer is, okay, we have to do a co-engineering of security and safety because you cannot easily split this up there for some of those use cases. One big topic which I had in my mind and which I think personally think will be a big topic is the forensics in autonomous driving. Maybe you've seen the movie I, Robot, where a robot is telling you, okay, you're having an accident, and it's like the system has manipulated. You can imagine that it would be nice later to have some kind of paper trail, a black box or something, some analysis tools where you can see, okay, was this a normal accident, or did somebody maliciously do something to the car? Of course, that's very complex because the car is taking decisions on its own, and you need some new tools like intrusion detection systems, like vehicle security operation centers, so that you have some data you can rely on. And you can imagine that probably there will be some future regulations on that. So if it really happens that, I don't know, unexpectedly a car has an accident, then this will be a big topic. But even before that, people will think about it and say, okay, we need something in place. And of course, something as a somebody working on security concepts, there's another factor which comes in. It's cost and effort. So it's not my topic, of course, but of course this can have some considerations for car manufacturers that you have to go for security and functional safety, and you cannot spare cost there because so you want the quality product, you want people to trust your product, and you have to kind of work it out then on the other side. So my choice, of course, would be security and safety here. All right, so I'm at the end. So we have few of takeaways. Complexity, that's the big topic here. Maybe you've counted how often I said it. So we have having some of the same lessons as in the automotive security as in classical IT systems, but always this big autonomous and individual safety impact remains. And from the time I've worked at Bosch, I've also seen security improve rapidly. And may you live in interesting times. It's a good time to join in the topic because a lot is moving. It's very interesting also to participate here. If you want to participate, there's the Automotive Research Group, also a Vienna chapter. We want to push for a get-together, so stay in touch with me if you want to join in. If you're interested in automotive security, there are some conferences. I've mentioned papers, so it's quite an interesting topic to get into, and I encourage you to do that. And that's it from my side, actually. We are in Vienna. We have some we have some jobs open. You can take a look, Bosch Career or Bosch Karriere. I encourage you to take a look. So I would propose that we do a quick Q&A session if we have the time. We have a few minutes.
Yes, we still have a few minutes left for Q&A. Thanks for the talk, Davor. And as there's not much time left, but we have many questions, let's start right away, I would say. And the first question would be, how do you see automotive security evolving in the coming years? Maybe you have like an outlook on some of the trends.
Okay, some parts I've mentioned already, what I do see evolving. My personal opinion is that this will be quite a big topic with the autonomous driving, because trust is a very big issue. So you don't want to sit somewhere where you just heard, okay, it could drive against the wall, and quality is such a big. So quality and security and safety is such a big thing here. So you see the media, right? Many of the big manufacturers, or the newer manufacturers, are critiqued about it, but they're moving forward with the product. So the more autonomous cars will be, the more effort will go into this.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that answer. Next question, you already talked a bit about it in your presentation, but maybe a bit more specific. What legal regulations do we need in the future to achieve 100% autonomous driving?
Okay, so I'm not working in law, so that's a good question. I don't know. I would say that at least, so the forensics is this would be my thing, my idea, where I would say, okay, if you want to have the trust of the people, you need something in place where you can check if this was really a security incident or not. And if you see, I don't know, a video of Anonymous telling you, okay, nowhere is safe, and actually the car had another accident for some other reason, then you would think about it like, okay, maybe I shouldn't use that car.
That's true. All right, let's go on to the next question, Davor. How do you balance security and functionality when designing automotive systems?
Can you repeat the last part? How security and?
How do you balance security and functionality when designing automotive systems?
Okay. Of course, security has to be seamless. It has to be convenient. This is why I have a job, basically. So it sometimes I don't have a concrete example, but sometimes you have to go and see for alternative solutions, maybe, which are also secure, but support the user experience. So especially with those tailored solutions, that's very important. You can imagine with those sports cars or something like that, the feeling is a big factor, and you don't want to have 5 keys, and like, of course, you have to want to have sit down and have a cell phone where you just press and the car opens or something like that. So that's always a challenge. But of course, security risks usually win over the application. So how to solve it? That's the creative part.
Yeah, in the end, it has to be a product that people are willing to pay for. So I can believe you if you say finding the right balance is pretty tough.
Yeah, you can imagine also 2-factor authentication. Yeah, that's a feature which you should have. But I mean, if you have to call somebody that you can open up your car, nobody would do that.
Yeah, true. All right, thanks for that answer as well. We already talked a bit about AI today, or actually last few live days. AI is a really big topic. So maybe also here the question from Tyne: how important is the role of AI in the automotive sector? Will it someday replace human developers at some point?
Of course, this question comes. I don't think it will. I don't think it will replace human developers, because when you go deep into drivers, when you go deep into debugging stuff, you need somebody who has really year-long experience for that. And you really see, I mean, you see the difference from a senior developer, of course, who debugs something in in 2 hours compared to like a week. And AI can be a good tool, I think. It can give you some hints. It can tell you, like I told you with VirusTotal, you put in some code and it tells you what it does. And of course, you have to look at it and see if it tells you the right thing. It can cut corners, I think. So with ChatGPT, what we're seeing right now, that you have some quick scripts pushing out, and of course it doesn't work or it may not work at the first try, but you cut corners, and this could be a supporting thing.
Okay.
And AI as a like for autonomous driving, that's a whole other topic, I would say.
Okay. All right. Thanks also for that outlook and your opinion. One last question, I would say. How important is collaboration between suppliers and automakers when it comes to ensuring automotive security?
Okay, very important, because key management. So that's one big topic which always comes up. Some car manufacturers, the big ones, are thinking a lot about it, and also have worked with some suppliers to work on concepts, which they then use and for the whole series. But if you're doing smaller tailored solutions, you have a lot of communication, of course, to figure out, okay, you don't have so strict requirements. What do you want? Do you want which algorithms, which, like, in the end, the engineer at the car should be able to unlock the car and not find out, oh, okay, we didn't consider that case. So you also have to think in this, like through the development phase, but also post-development, that everything is in place, basically, and the communication is very important. The more open the requirements are, the more important the communication part is.
And that's for the whole life cycle of the product, of course. So yeah, that's also. All right, Davor, thank you so much for the talk and for the Q&A afterwards. I hope you had as much fun as we did, and hopefully see you on another live day.
Yep. So follow me on LinkedIn, drop me a line, tell me how it was. I will be glad to hear from you.
Yes. Thanks so much, Davor. Bye.
Bye.
Right, and before we go to the next speaker of the day, just 20-second break.
Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
And right back to security and the next speaker of today. He is developer advocate at GitGuardian, is involved in tech communities since 2005. He loves sharing his knowledge by giving talks, such as today. And in his free time, he likes to play live music, karaoke, or even performing improv. Welcome, Dwayne.
Hello, Benedict.
Hi,
Hello,
Dwayne.
everybody at WeAreDeveloper Live.
Yes, thanks so much for joining. Where are you exactly joining us from? I think you are overseas.
Actually, today I'm joining you from San Francisco. It's a little bit early here, but I'm here for the RSA conference.
All right, all right. Then good morning to you. I hope you had your first coffee. And before we start with the talk, would you mind giving us some insights in the topic which we're going to learn from you today?
Sure. And this is what I'll be laying out in the talk, but we see one of the big growing problems of code security as the secret leakage problem. Every year we put out a report, the state of secret sprawl, and we find that it's a growing problem, unfortunately, not a shrinking problem. And it's growing at a rate that doesn't correspond to just new people joining the world of development. But through some automation, through some clever use of Git, we can really make Git do a lot of things beyond just git add, git commit, git push. But we can leverage that to build some automations that can keep us safe. And that's really the heart of the talk.
But yeah, then I'm looking very much forward to all the tips you can give it on Git. And without further ado, I would say, stage is all yours, Dwayne.
Thank you very much. So thanks everybody for being here and wanting to learn about being a little bit more safe with your code. So as I was introduced, I'm Dwayne. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I'm joining you from San Francisco today, but I live on the internet mostly. I also host a security repo podcast. That's what it's called, the Security Repo Podcast, with my colleague here at GitGuardian, Mackenzie. We talk to experts from around the world. So check that out if you get a chance and you like podcasts. I'm on the social medias at MC Dwayne over on Mastodon social. I'm more and more there these days over Twitter, but I'm on both, honestly. And hit me up about anything. Like I was introduced, I love rock and roll. I love performing improv. I love karaoke. If you want to talk about those things, or if I'm ever in your area and you want to go do one of those things, I will always be down to go do that stuff with you. So I work for a company called GitGuardian. We are a platform as a service. We also make a standalone version, but we're obsessed with helping people figure out where their hard-coded secrets are throughout their source code, whether that's at the local development level or out in their CI environments. Detect where those secrets have leaked, and then give you a platform to figure out what to do about them. We just are releasing a honey token product this week. Won't be mentioned anywhere on this talk, but honey tokens are credentials that don't go to anything, but you use them, it gives you an alert, so you can detect threats earlier. That's all I'll say about that. You can go to their website to find out more. But what I'm really here to talk about is this constant cat and mouse game that we're all playing all the time if you work in development. And that is that developers are constantly trying to guard their code from attackers. And they're not on their own. Security teams are there to help them out. But from the security team that doesn't talk to the developer and the developer doesn't talk to the security team, it can feel very isolating and very scary out there. And we're going to talk about a few scary examples of where that communication between security and the dev team has broken down a bit and what that has looked like in the real world. So if you get a little panicky, if you ever find yourself, wow, this is a little scary or triggering, just recite the Bene Gesserit Litany Against Fear and you should be fine. I recite this about once a day at this point because I work in security and I'm always reading about the newest vulnerabilities. But let's look at one in depth, and then we'll talk about a few others. But Uber last year was hacked. Maybe you heard about this, maybe you didn't. But they phished a super user's account, a super admin's account, hit him with so many multi-factor authentication requests that eventually one slipped through. It was a teenager from the UK, got in, found that with that super admin access, he had a lot of power to just look around. What he found were PowerShell scripts, ultimately, that contained hard-coded credentials to literally everything else in Uber's network. He actually tormented the team, got into their Slack and said, hey, I've done this, changed a bunch of things internally. And they didn't believe him. They thought it was some internal prankster. It was so well done, and it was so well, he covered his tracks so well. Ultimately, he went to the New York Times to tell them, and that was front page news. That's how we know about it. Toyota, they had an incident last year where they had a subcontractor who had pushed part of a repo public. That part of the repo he pushed public contained a data key, or a key to a data server that contained over 296,000 customers' credentials, or their email addresses and some private information. And it took them 5 years to figure that out. It finally took a third party to point out that, hey, this thing is public. We probably all remember Samsung. They were involved in a couple things last year. I'll speed up a little bit on these horror stories. Data was leaked. Immediately, the 6,000 secrets they had in their source code were all attempted to be exploited. That was in March. In September, they had a different incident altogether. They've never said publicly that the two are linked, but it's pretty obvious the two are linked. AstraZeneca, they had an issue where they leaked the credentials to a test environment, and there shouldn't be anything in a test environment, right? Well, they actually had pushed a bunch of actual real patient data due to just pushing the wrong database to the wrong place and connecting to the wrong thing, and exposed an undisclosed number of end user credentials in healthcare. Not good. So what do all those have in common? Why did I just tell you all these horrible facts? Hopefully your security is a little more robust, more safe, but those are big companies and they have taken security very seriously as well. The one thing in all of those is that there was a hard-coded credential somewhere. You can have the best security in the world. You can build the biggest walls. You can build moats. You can have the best firewalls in the universe. But if someone has the actual key to get in, they can get in. This is obviously a funny picture. These are my Photoshop skills. It doesn't get better than this, folks. But if you hid the key to a big place, this is where, if you're not familiar with Fort Knox is the fort where America used to keep its gold reserves. So this is like literally where the army was guard all of the gold in America that America owned. So no one would leave the key to Fort Knox out front. That's just a little bit silly. But we do find when it's not the national gold reserve, we do start doing things like this in real life, where I don't know what's on the other side of that door, but that's a really complicated lock. But my gut would be that there's like pens or the storage closet or staples, things that, yeah, it would be bad if people took those, but it's not mission critical. And this lock came with the door. Okay, let's just put the code on the door, make it easy for everyone. It's still a little bit secure. You can't just walk in. You do got to mess with the lock. It's a little silly. And you might be thinking, well, of course, we would never do this in our code, right? Unfortunately, we do this an awful lot. And I'm not here to shame anybody. Sometimes you just got to test. Sometimes you just got to make sure that that database credential worked. Sometimes you just got to make sure that that API endpoint is up and you have to authenticate it quickly. And if you do it and you immediately take it back out, there's no harm done. But as I mentioned in the preface here, we put out a state of secret sprawl report every year at the company I work for, GetGuardian. You can go get it yourself down at that link, or just go to the website and it's there. Last year, we found over 10 million hard-coded credentials in public GitHub repos. That's just last year. And that's 5.5 commits out of every 1,000 exposed at least one secret. This is a giant jump from previous years. I don't have it here, but it was 6 million we found in 2021. It was 2.5 million we found in 2020. It's growing. It's almost a doubling every year we're seeing. But this is at the same time when GitHub itself is only experiencing 27% growth year over year. So it can't just be students. It can't just be new people putting out insecure code because they don't know what they're doing. And as we saw earlier, these are some major companies. These are people with very serious security postures. So what's going on? Well, we think it's not intentional. We think it's, well, people get in a hurry. I forgot to take my secret back out because I put it in a test and now the database works, but oh, now I have this other bug related to that. So let me go debug that real quick. Oh, and that now has caused something else in the code to go wrong. Now I need to go fix that. Meanwhile, I get alerts on Slack. Uh-oh, I get a pull request that I need to go deal with immediately. So what do we do in Git when we are at a stopping point? We need to save our work. We git add, git commit, git push, and we move on. Sometimes forgetting this is here. Other times we push our code to the wrong place. Git remote is awesome, but Git remote also means that you can work around your company's security policy with one configuration change to your local machine. You can have the most locked down GitHub Enterprise or GitLab instance in the world, but if that copy of the repo is on your machine, you can do anything you want with it. So as we saw with the case of the Toyota. Who's ultimately responsible for keeping our credentials out of our code? Alex Rice from HackerOne said last year at Security, in the best of organizations, we're looking at about 100-to-1 ratio of all of your engineers, your developers, your people that touch code, it's about 100 to 1 to the security team. I think in smaller companies, it's about a 40 to 1. The larger the companies, I think this number holds pretty true and pretty accurate. So it can't just be the security team's job. It really does need to be the developer's job because we're, well, shifting left. Shifting left, I think, has been misinterpreted by some teams as, well, let's just put all the onus on the developer. They're the ones that are responsible for their own security. And developers don't think about security last because developers typically don't think about security in the bigger sense. Not the same way your security teams do. But we live in a very interconnected world where a developer making a mistake in their code here in the development lifecycle is going to result in problems over here in the development lifecycle as it goes out to production and affect other systems that they might not even be aware they're affecting. There's a tool, though, that every developer today is using. And if we use the tool that's already there, then developers are more likely to embrace a new technology. If a security team goes to a development team and says, hey, you need to use this very heavy-handed product, you need to change your workflow dramatically, it's not going to go well because developers like their own workflows. But fortunately, they do use this thing called Git. So if you allow me to dig in here just a little bit and explain why Git is important, I think Git is awesome, but it in and of itself doesn't make your code any more or less secure. If you type man git into your terminal, the actual manual for Git calls Git the stupid content tracker. That's what Linus and team originally thought of it as. It's just a stupid content tracker. In fact, Git was never even supposed to be a source control management system. According to Linus, the original email list on the Linux email list in 2005 said, this will never be a full-blown source control system. This is just some patches or some scripts I wrote to manage my patches. That was how Git was born. So Git is a two-edged sword here. It's become the default mechanism we use to move our code around, as well as the storage system for our code long-term. If we don't treat it correctly, if we don't treat it for what it really is, we're going to make our code very insecure overall. So there's another talk I give that is the nuts and bolts of how Git works, and I think it fits right here. So welcome to my other talk. Within this talk, Demystifying Git, Version Control for First Principles. I'm going to give a lightning talk of this, and then we'll get back to the main point, because I know you're all dying to see how Git hooks work. But at its heart, Git is a file tracking system. That's what it really does. It's not just tracking your changes. It's making a full-blown copy of what happened in the directory every single time. Then writing down when that thing happened and who caused that thing to happen. If you were, in fact, going to build Git today, you might use 7-zip. You might use pzip. zlib is what they use internally, and it's super, super efficient. Or zpack, I'm sorry, not zlib. Zpack. It's a super efficient file compression system. You need a universal time tracking system. Fortunately, we have one of those. It's called Unix time. That's like the 6 billion in Unix time right now, or 1.6 billion. Go check what time it is in Unix. It's very early in the morning for me. We don't have it pulled up. But every computer in the world knows what time it is according to Unix time. And then we need a universal way to track those things. Well, text files work really well. If it was good enough for Linus, it's good enough for us, right? There's also this fun thing about Git that everything is local, that Git is tracking its point of view of what reality is. I love this picture because this is in Oakland. There's a poet and author, Gertrude Stein, an American author, who said, the problem with Oakland is there's no there. Well, some artists in the 70s put a there in Oakland and a here in Berkeley. This is the Berkeley-Oakland border. So no matter where you are, and I love this picture because no matter where you are in the world looking at this, you are here to you, and here is there, and there is there. And if you were standing by there in the picture, you came to Oakland and stood by there, here would be there, and you would be here. That's a little confusing, but that's how Git thinks. It's like wherever Git's standing, wherever Git is specifically told it is, that's where its reality is. It tracks that in a file called head. And you notice head's only 20 bytes big. That's not kilobytes, that's bytes. Because head looks like this. Head is just a very, very, very tiny text file that says the reference that I'm currently here is reference head's main. What does that mean? We have this other file that tracks that. Again, this is Linus Torvalds just writing down in lists in text files. That goes to head's main, goes to this particular hash. That is a Git commit. In this case, this is GitLens, the open source GitLens project. I used to work for the company that made GitLens. So that's when I made this slide originally. Anyway, why is that important? Well, what are those references to? Part of the beauty of Git is every single time you take a snapshot, you do a commit, what you're actually getting is completely compressed versions of the file at that point in time. So these 3 files, we made some changes. We now have a new compression of those files, very efficient compression. So when we do a git add, we take a compression of these and put them in a working tree. That tree is then full of these blobs. Binary large objects is what blob theoretically stands for. Then we take that tree on a commit, and then we commit that. Git's super efficient. If we didn't make any changes to a specific file in a commit or that iteration, it just points back to the previous version and says, hey, we'll just use that version. Oh, we didn't make any changes this time. We'll just use that version. And Git trees back all the way. But what this means from a security aspect is that if we make a commit here, because we're moving forward in time here, this right to the right is forward in time. If we make a commit here where we added a secret, let's say an AWS key in plain text in our code because we were testing something. And the next time we go to work, we're like, oh, that shouldn't be there. I'll just go ahead and take that out now and move on with our day. By the time our code over here gets to production and we go through our normal static code analysis, hey, yeah, the production code, there's no secret in there. That's fine. If we think back to Samsung, part of the way they discovered the 6,000 keys wasn't just what was in the production branch. They looked through all the branches and started looking through all the commits because this commit here is there forever. The secrets in there are accessible as fast as you can type git checkout. So writing a script that goes and transverses the entire tree, checks out and scans, is extremely fast. It's super easy to write and will start producing results very quickly. Importantly, not tracking diffs. We use diffs, the concept of diffs, when we make patches, and that's what gets pushed over the wire because that's really, really small. And then we reapply that patch made out of the diff on the other end. So when you do a git commit, you're building of real actual compression. But then when you do a git push, Git just moves the changes over the wire. So it's super efficient. But once you do that, the same principle applies. If you pushed this and then you pushed this, all the things in here still are going to exist for the rest of the time. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. Thanks for coming to my talk today. Stop committing your secrets, Git hooks to the rescue. So Git gives us a way internally to ignore things. So if we put our secrets, our credentials in an env file, for instance, and then push that in an env file, and then we include it here, then Git will completely ignore it. It will never make it to source code, and everybody's happy. Except there's a problem right here that we've accidentally commented out env. I know exactly how I did this. Working in VS Code, I highlighted 2 lines and did the command slash. I meant to only do it once to add this as a comment. I accidentally commented the line below it. I honestly did this by accident once and took a screenshot of it because I thought, wow, that's not good. So we can use it to make sure that we don't. So you might be thinking, well, I'll just move my env file somewhere else and reference it. That's what AWS does. That's why AWS gives you by default a .aws directory out in your home directory. .aws/credentials is on your home. It's not in your project file. So it should be safe out there. If you add then .aws into your git ignore, well, it should be fine, right? The other path is using encrypted vaults, and this is the preferred method. This is what you should be doing with your secrets. Adding them to things like HashiCorp Vault or Azure Key Vault or I am Secret Manager on Amazon. Every platform has some version of this. And there are tools like Doppler, which is a company out of Australia who makes a really cool universal one that you can use everywhere. So you store your secrets in there in one of these services, and then you programmatically call them back into the code. So if a developer does it the right way, if their code leaks, they'll say, all right, database credentials equal vault dot the name of the secret dot some internal code. To the attacker, that's useless. They know that, oh man, all the secrets are in vault. I'm just going to move on to look for somewhere else because I can't. That's such a headache to even go try to break into that. I'm not even going to bother. And if we just did those two things consistently, use git ignore and HashiCorp or things like Vault, key stores that we could programmatically call, then this talk wouldn't need to exist. Unfortunately, I showed you the numbers earlier. This is a growing problem, not a shrinking one. It's not from the lack of people wanting to be more insecure. It's from the fact that we're in a hurry, that we have so many things to balance in our lives. There's only so many hours in the day. And we just got to make sure that endpoint's up. We just got to test this. I actually caught myself a couple weeks ago while I was tinkering with something, almost committing a secret, doing exactly this. It's just so easy to do. And I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm not saying you shouldn't test that secret's working. Of course not. I'm not going to tell you how to develop. But realize that is not an issue you're ever going to solve either. That's just a workflow. When you're debugging something, sometimes that's the right answer to do. But if you actually commit that secret and push it, that's what I'm here to really rally against and hopefully encourage you to never actually commit and push again. So in theory, if you do push a secret, you can get it back out. It's Git after all. You have complete control of your history. If it's only you and you're working completely by yourself and no one else can get access to that code you pushed, it's pretty straightforward. Even if it's a few commits back, Git gives you the tools. I'm not going to give a demo today, but the documentation's there. How do you surgically remove a single commit from your history? But we're not working by ourselves. That's the whole point of DevOps. You're working on a team. You're working with a bunch of teams. Your code is going to end up in a pipeline with a bunch of other code. Then it becomes really painful to remove because now you have to coordinate between all of the team. What are we doing here? At the same time, we have to remove it and then repush, rebase, and understand exactly which is the true version now. Not to mention, you have to actually admit to your team and to the world, like, I messed up. Sorry, everybody. We have to rotate a key now. I know that's painful, but hey, it's better than having a security incident. So if you haven't been able to tell, one of the things that I firmly believe is at fault here is human error. I haven't used the word human error here explicitly until now. Humans are awesome at so many things. Consistency is not one of them. Robots, on the other hand, are terrible at most things. I would not trust a robot to drive my car yet, as we heard from the previous speaker. We're not quite there yet with completely autonomous self-driving cars. But I trust a robot to keep me at a consistent speed. Cruise control, I trust that. I've trusted that for years. I trust a robot to every day wake up at 5 a.m. to run a cron job and execute a script one after another. I trust that because that's what robots are great at. So why don't we build a robot that stops us from committing our secrets? I bet you when I showed you Git earlier, like, where's he going with this, showing me the Git folder thing? Well, it turns out internally to Git, there is a folder called hooks. Hooks is this amazing automation platform built into the tools that the developers are already using. I told you it'd all come back around. You can go to a developer and like, hey, let's modify your workflow by changing something inside of Git. And that's all you have to think about it. I promise you, nothing else of your workflow will change. And if you start that conversation that way, one, you might get their curiosity, but you're going to get a lot less resistance. Oh, you mean I don't have to install anything? Oh, like what does that Git hook do? And that's a different conversation than please use this other entirely different system and learn a new tool. People don't have time to learn new tools all the time. So Git hooks is a folder that basically lets you build your own contraptions. I really love Rube Goldberg. This is from Wikipedia. This is the self-operating napkin. When he sips his soup, eventually wipes his mouth. And it does all these crazy steps in between. You can build your own crazy scripts out of there because Git, just like the character moving the spoon, there are 17 places that's inside of Git hooks that when one of these thresholds is passed, Git looks into the hooks folder and says, is there a script named exactly pre-commit? Is there one named exactly commit message? So if you go to make a Git commit, it says, all right, is there a script called commit message? If there is, let's go fire off whatever in that script. So if you don't go to any other website as a result of this talk, even if you don't go to the Git Guardian website, I'm fine with that. Go to githooks.com. If you're watching this from home or you're not driving a vehicle or you're on one of those autonomous vehicles and your hands are free, just pop open a new window, GitHooks, you'll thank me later. It's an amazing website full of awesome examples, including what I'm talking about today in parts, but just a big world of GitHooks already exists out there. So you're not working from scratch. If you go try to build these on your own, you're going to run into some weirdness. And weirdness, not in the sense of like, hey, this is weird how this works, because it's just a bash script. In this case, it's a script or a shell script. But that's all. That's not the weird part. The weird part is you get to things like rev parse. Rev parse is my favorite description of a command in history. This is what pre-commit looks like, by the way. You notice it's called .sample. This is by default because, well, .sample doesn't run. That just is there to stop the hook from running and let you know that this is still the default sample. If you remove the sample there, this would actually run. So rev parse, type man get rev parse into your terminal, and it will tell you that rev parse picks out and massages parameters. I don't know what that means exactly either. And I've been doing this for years. Massage parameters. And then this other one, get hash object. It's a porcelain command in Git. This is the actual compute object ID and optionally create a blob from a file. That requires some pretty deep knowledge to know what that means. But you know who wrote that? Linus, trying to figure out how to manage his patch messages correctly while managing the Linux project. So for him, it made sense. For me, this makes a lot more sense. So I'm going to call my environment Bash. And I love Bash. I'm a giant Bash nerd. Not even going to lie. But as long as you can reach the environment, if it's an executable environment and your setup, such as JavaScript or PHP or Python, whatever, you can make scripts out of whatever language you want, whatever you prefer. So you're not tied to Bash. I just like it. But in this case, props to Ed Thompson. Edward Thompson, he used to maintain NPM. He was the lead that pushed Git actions into the world. He's responsible for a lot of things. The Git library, libgit2, which is a C portable C library that accomplishes Git without needing to install the Git command line. So if you think of things like GitHub or GitLab, they're not running the command line. They're accomplishing the same thing through a C library or a node library based on that C library. Anyway, Edward Thompson wrote, my favorite thing he wrote was Git dad. It's a little tiny thing you can add to your machine. So when you accidentally type Git dad instead of Git add, it will change it to Git add and then tell you a dad joke as a result by curling icanhasdadjoke.com. Too long of an explanation for a simple script. But this is actually, I do run this in a lot of my private repos when I'm working on stuff because I like dad jokes. Why not tell me a dad joke every time I go to do a Git add? In this case, every time I write a commit, it will actually tell me a dad joke. So there's that one. You can go play with that on your own. So this robot I mentioned earlier that we can build through this automation platform, what should it do? Well, this is basically the plan. When I go to commit, I'm going to tie into one of the Git hooks that are tied to commit, such as pre-commit, our commit message. That's another good one. And I'm going to look for any kind of username, passwords, API keys, security certificates, anything that looks like a credential. Any other defined pattern I like. And if it's there, let's go ahead and throw an error and stop the commit from happening. Sounds like a good plan. And you can build this yourself. Nothing's stopping you. So open up your Git commit message, take out the guts or comment out the guts, and then write your own logic. Here, I'm using Git grep. So grep is one of my favorite tools in the command line, a repository. So it's inside of Git as well. They pulled it in, and it solves the problem of what are you trying to search, because it just searches the index. It makes it a little simpler. So if you're using Git a lot, Git grep should be in your repository or your back pocket. So here I'm using regular expression to look for anything that looks like a password is being set, such as here, or that I'm looking for something that's 20 characters long, that's all uppercase or numbers, such as an AWS key would look like. And if I try to run this, there's my Git dad joke. And then, oh, well, these things look like passwords, no hard code password. I exit 2 and I've stopped. And I can put any other logic I want around that and start building my own detectors. You can find repos full of detectors already pre-built. Someone's already worked out the grep for it. But then you've built this thing, which means you need to maintain the thing, which means you need now to account for false positives and for example strings and things that are okay that look maybe like a password to your regular expression, but that's just the name of the var. And that should be fine if you're pulling from an environment variable, and so on and so forth. And they have to sell this to your team by yourself. Luckily, you don't have to build this. As I mentioned earlier, you probably could guess from some of the other things I've said, open source already took care of this problem. This isn't a solved problem. This is a problem still a lot of people are working on. I'm going to tell you about 3 of them. I do work for one of them, but there are plenty others out there besides these 3. These are just the 3 I'm going to talk about. When I first wrote this talk, it was about this, and then I've since added on these things. There's another project I really like out there called Git Leaks. That's worth your time as well, especially if you're a smaller team or just working on open source stuff. But all of these have their pluses and minuses. So AWS secrets, Git secrets from AWS Labs. This hooks into the 3 hooks that happen pre-commit. So when you do a git commit, all 3 of these get triggered in order. So it will automatically build you a triple check. And it's looking for AWS specific things. I mean, it was written by an AWS team member, but that's the downside. It's not officially supported by AWS. So if you're on the phone with them and support, this isn't part of the actual AWS services. It's one of the lab projects. But it's really, really good. there are people, since it is all open source, you can extend it out to other things. People have done that. You can go find repositories where people have made it work for Azure, or people have made it work for Google, and added those regular expressions in as well. And if you write regex, so full transparency, the code I showed earlier where you could write your own, that came from AWS Git secrets. That's where that idea of using git grep even came from. That's why I know the regular expression for an AWS key. There's another open source project out there. They're now their own company called Truffle, but started by a guy named Dylan back in the day, 2016, I think, when he first released. But Truffle Hog is a secrets finder. Like, truffles are tasty to pigs, so they put a pig on the logo. I love their little logo. A Truffle Hog detects secrets in your source code. It can detect in any arbitrary path or any arbitrary file as well. Really solid open source tool. I don't know much about their paid product these days, but they do have an enterprise platform around this. The thing, I personally don't use it for a couple reasons. One is it does require you to use the pre-commit framework to execute a pre-commit hook. The pre-commit framework is an awesome project in and of itself if you live in the world of Python. Same way, if you live in AWS Labs Git secrets might be a good place to start because you use AWS all the time. If you already love pre-commit framework and you live in Python world, this is definitely something to consider. You can run it as a GitHub action as well, but that actually doesn't make a lot of sense for our use case because you would already have the secret on GitHub by the time it caught it. But just wanted to mention that they do have a GitHub action as well. So if you wanted to start tying it into your CI workflows, you can do it for that as well. They're tuned for open source and getting you as much information as possible. So the rate of reports of high false positives. I've heard mixed reviews on it, and that's just, you need to hear near there. It's just, but it is free. It's open source. It's awesome, and it is an option. Now we're in GG Shield, which is open source in and of itself. It's a Python-based tool that does exactly this, but with us, we can install that Git hook globally or just locally. And we can even do a pre-push command as well. So if you're working with a lot of patches and you don't write all of the commits that end up in if you didn't author all of the commits that end up in your code, pre-push might be a good workflow as well. Because patch apply does make the commit, but it doesn't fire off the same pre-commit hooks. Anyway, if you're not using a patching strategy, then maybe pre-push isn't for you. We also offer a pre-receive hook, but that takes some special setup on your Git server. If you're running completely your own Git server, you should probably look into pre-receive hooks as well. The downside here is it does require a Git Guardian account. Git Guardian is a platform as a service, so you would need an account to actually perform the search or the credential matching. You can have a free account, absolutely free for personal use and teams under 25 forever, but you do need to be online to do it. We do sell a completely standalone air gap product, but that's not free. And there is the possibility you could hit API limits as well, because again, it is a platform play. So what does all this look like in action? You sat through this entire presentation, you got to hear about the internals of Git to get to this slide. So I have a repo that I have AWS secrets keys stuffed into. Don't do this. This was an example. These aren't real keys. These are made up, just random typing. I took a real key and just randomly typed instead. And I committed it, or I added it here. You can see it's staged, my config.yaml. And I try to do a git commit here, and there we go. Git Guardian, this is GG Shield. Git Guardian has detected that, hey, I got these keys here. I shouldn't have them. And I have failed to make the commit. no matter how you get here, no matter if this was Trufflehog doing this, if AWS Secrets doing it, this is the most important part, that you have an error, that you didn't make the commit. If this happens locally, you're the only person that will know. This doesn't set off alarm bells. Catching it at the local level saves everyone the headache. You're never going to have to surgically remove it later if you caught it right here. Your security team won't even know this happened, because why would they need to know? This isn't a security incident. This is a development workflow situation. So I'm going to wrap up, and then we'll have some time for questions. So in conclusion to all this, don't hard code your secrets. If we could just get to a world where every developer proudly says, I never hard code secrets, I always use Vault, I consistently use env files, and I make sure that that's properly get ignored, then the rest of this talk doesn't matter. But we're humans. That's the reality of it. What we need to do is focus on not committing the secrets. And we can use automation for that, as I've shown. GitHooks is this beautiful platform. Again, githooks.com. You should definitely go check out Matthew Hudson's amazing project over there to keep you informed about what's possible with hooks. And use open source. If you want to build your own, just for the heck of it, to see how it works, I would even start from open source and look at how it's doing it and start moving back to backwards from there. Because you might have a special project. I don't think like most things detect things in COBOL or Fortran. And if you're working in that with Git, congratulations. That'd be awesome. Actually, make sure you hit me up on Twitter about that, because I'd really love to know who you are. Excuse me. And with that, say I'm Dwayne. I live in Chicago. I've been a developer advocate since 2016. I have been working in tech since 2005. Hit me up on Twitter or Mastodon. Again, been using Mastodon more these days than Twitter. If you ever want to talk about improv or karaoke or rock and roll, I'm always happy to chat. And thanks for coming to my talk. Talk many of your secrets. With that, I'll open it up for some questions.
Hello again, Dwayne. Thanks for the amazing talk, and thanks for the dad jokes. Some new ones in my repertoire, which I didn't know. So I took away some learnings from you today.
Good.
All right.
And we have to dive in.
Sorry.
Oh, I was saying, a quick side note on dad jokes. This is something ChatGPT is actually great at. If you haven't experimented with ChatGPT, go ask it to write you dad jokes about any subject. It can. Some of them are okay. Anyway.
Okay, thanks for that, Dwayne. And I would say what the ChatGPT can't do for us is the Q&A. So I would say we jump into that as long as we have still time. And you already also said that you're in tech since 2005 or more involved in tech. Maybe you want to give us some insights on how you became interested in tech, what your developer journey was, and how you got where you are now.
So the short answer is I went to school for computer science and then didn't do anything with it. And the old saying is true: if you don't use it, you lose it. So I didn't become a developer. I then fell into the world of tech sales. I moved to the Bay Area, and I worked for this wonderful little company in the Java community called Frkat as a sales rep. And that was my first foray into any real community. The Java community is still like my original OG open source community. I lived through the Oracle acquisition. I got to go to the last Java 1, the last Javapolis, and be part of that whole community. And it really set my path for the rest of my life, that open source matters. Open source is a really cool way to meet people, and it's a great common ground. Because there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of infighting in all open source communities. That's just the nature of the beast, though. But I wouldn't trade my relationships with Java people or Drupal people or WordPress people for anything else. Those are the best relationships I've ever created throughout my career. Now I work in security, and meeting people that don't have that mindset of open source automatically good has been a little bit eye-opening. But the community around security is its own thing as well. But there are a lot of open source people here. But that's really what I look for first, no matter what I'm going to do next, is there a community around it? Is there how do I tap into that community? Who is the community? That's the beauty. So if I'm interviewing for a company, and I would advise this to anyone out there, look at the community around that company. How is that company perceived by that community? If it's neutral or we don't know about them yet, that's one thing. If it's big red warning flags, then run away. Go find something else to do with your life than work for a terrible company.
Yeah, words to live by. Dwayne, you mentioned open source quite a few times during your talks and also now. Do you currently work or contribute on some projects, or do you have some to recommend maybe to the audience to get started?
I'll do a quick plug for one of my favorite websites in the world, and I love the team that runs it, opensource.com. Which sounds like a misnomer. That would be .com, but it's a work out of the Red Hat community. It's just a wonderful collection of open source authors writing about open source. So I've contributed to that. You can actually read a version of that Git talk I gave as a 4-part series on opensource.com, and I'm actually working on a new piece for them now. But that's a good jumping off point just to see like what's in the community, what do these community care about, like the communities in general care about. I'm an old school Drupaler. I've been doing Drupal since 2013. I haven't touched it in a little bit, but I'm still active in the Chicago Drupal community. In fact, today starts mid-camp, the Drupal camp in Chicago. I unfortunately am in San Francisco for RSA and can't make it, but I've actually helped organize that event, help do some stuff there. So that's the beauty of open source, is there's so many ways to contribute. Like I've never written any actual code that ended up in WordPress. I've rewritten a lot of their documentation, not a majority, of course, but I've rewritten a chunk of their documentation. I used to work with the marketing team there to write a glossary and make case studies. There are so many ways you can contribute to open source. It's not just code. So if you're sitting there thinking like, I could never be involved in an open source project because my coding chops aren't up to speed, I guarantee you can help. If you go to any open source tool you ever use, their GitHub repo or GitLab repo or wherever it sits, look at the issue queue. You're going to be shocked to see the number of things that are in there that aren't just code related. Things like, hey, this isn't documented well. And if you open up the source code, again, it's open. You can open and do that. It's the 4 freedoms. You have the right to examine the code. You have the right to modify it as you see fit. You have the right to run the code any way you see fit. You have the right then to redistribute that code. Those rights give us the ability to look at the code and like, that documentation makes no sense. The inline documentation, the comments aren't what this block does exactly. Probably because when they updated the code, they didn't bother for the inline comments. I have a friend, very good friend, Bridget, who has rewritten a lot of core WordPress internal documentation, like inline code, and she has contributor credit for the core, but she's never written an actual functional line of PHP or JavaScript in any of that. So I would encourage everybody, if you're interested in just lending a hand to the bigger community, find a tool you like. Like, I would love to help with this and go see what you can do as documentation, just spreading the word. OWASP is a open organization. They're not an open source project per se, but I'm a member of OWASP. And I contribute to them by giving talks about OWASP and spreading the word and making sure people are aware of all the cool stuff they do. So it's just a passion of mine that if stuff's good, we should make sure it gets better and that other people know about it.
Yeah, they certainly will. After your talk, we also posted the link in the chat for the audience to check it out and make it as easy for them to find it as possible. Good. And Dwayne, I would say let's jump to some more talk-related questions, as we got some submitted from the audience. First one, is it possible for teams to measure the effectiveness of Git hooks in reducing the risk of secrets exposure in their code base? If so, how?
That's a great question. So there are really 2 sides we see to secret management maturity. We have a whole case study or white paper about this on our website, but we've talked to literally thousands of companies about this problem set. So Git Guardian, really, we're a detection engine that detects where secrets are. If everyone consistently is using this tool locally, then you'll never get a new commit with a secret in it going to your repositories. That's how you measure. If you're consistently doing it, then they don't show up. If they show up from one person committing it, then you know exactly who's committing it. Git blame it's a poorly named tool, but it's an accurate tool. It gives us a way to very quickly see who's actually caused this. I mean, that's what Git's doing. Like, what happened? When did it happen? Who caused it to happen? That's why you have to sign your commits. You can't do anonymous Git commits. I mean, you can make anonymous GitHub repos, or anonymous Gmail accounts, but still, at the end of the day, someone had to sign that commit. So that's the way you tell effectiveness. Enforcement's the other side we often get into, and that I don't have a great answer for. You can tell a developer to do something all day, but they're still going to do what they do. If you can, as a team, encourage them positively to, like, whoever gets it installed first, whoever proves that they, whoever has the least amount of secrets pushed over the next month get some kind of award. Maybe that's a good way to do it. I don't know a good answer to that. That's just me speculating. But enforcement's the hardest part of that. But measuring it, you simply measure how many commits contain some kind of secret, and that's your effectiveness.
Yeah, and hey, the part with gamification of the processes works also pretty well, I think. So for motivating the team and everything. So also nice point right there, I would say. Thanks for that answer, Dwayne. We got another question. Can Git hooks be used to prevent other types of sensitive data from being committed to a Git repository?
If you can dream it, you can script it. If you can script it, the automation will take care of it. The short answer is yeah. So I was showing you specifically keeping hard-coded credentials out of your source code using these tools. This is one use case. Oh, actually, I guess I showed you two because I showed you Git dad, or the curl a dad joke. But again, if you can write the grep for it, you can search for anything. If you can figure out the grep for, the regular expression for an entire chunk of code, then you can start looking for that arbitrarily in any file, and then automate that process through use of Git hook. It's very common to see Git hooks with linters in them. I think that was a much more common use case for Git hooks than what I'm talking about. But again, go to githooks.com and there's tons of examples of what you can do. And that's another reason I love Bash is I love a CLI. I love to live in the command line. If I can keep my finger away from a mouse, I will. So if a tool's got a CLI, absolutely add it in there. There's going back to honey tokens. There's actually a tool I'm working on right now for personal use that checks, see if any secrets are in my commit. If there aren't, and there aren't any other secrets in the entire repository, it makes a honey token, creates a file, puts the honey token in the file, then adds it to the repo. That's a Git hook. Like, it does this automatically for me, so I don't have to think about, did I actually secure this? Did I actually put a honey token here? So if anybody juggles the handle, I'll get an alarm. It will do that for me moving forward. It's not quite ready yet. I'm not going to open source it, and then like next week or so. But yeah, if you watch my repos, maybe I'll put it out there soon.
Okay, awesome, Dwayne. Thank you so much for that answer as well. Next question. Do you know of some alternative solutions for managing secrets in Git repositories?
Well, like I say, every platform has its own built-in secret manager. If you're using like Code Anywhere or what's the GitLab or not lab, Git. Sorry, my brain's farting on me here this morning. The tools like, what's the GitHub project where code spaces? Code spaces, and the other options out there where you are doing cloud development environments. Those involve, like, you can have env files there, but you want to use whatever internal built tool will manage your secrets in a safe way where you can just programmatically call them either from an ENV file call or I mentioned them in the talk. I'm not here to sell you on them, but I just really, really like them. And they're Doppler is the name of the company. They're out of Australia. But they think that you should just universally have a secret manager that you are always referencing, no matter what system you're using. So it works on your local, and it works between multiple platforms out there. But there are a ton of alternatives to hard coding your secrets. We've just mentioned a few, but that's the most common ones are HashiCorp Vault is the one you'll run into the most. It's very heavy-handed, but it's universal, and every platform in the world can interact with it.
Okay, yeah, but staying with one totally makes sense. So get used to one, and maybe you never have to switch. So, Dwayne, thank you so much for the talk, for all the information you gave us, also for the cool Q&A with you. Many, many greetings over to San Francisco. Enjoy your stay and the conference, and hopefully see you soon on another live day.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I hope everyone out there enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dwayne. Bye. All right, and before we jump to the next speaker of the day, just a 20-second break.
Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
And right back to security and the next speaker of the day. She is developer advocate at Davor, has experience also as a developer evangelist, and lives with Sanderson, her tuxedo cat. Welcome, Liz.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Liz. Wonderful to have you. I'm fine. Hope you're too.
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah.
Happy that I got to catch the tail end of that last talk. I feel like secrets management is like such a hot thing right now and so important. So it's good to like hear a few of the Q&As come in.
Yeah, it was really, really good talk from Dwayne, and also the Q&As. The questions were really nice. But I would say your talk will be also awesome. So maybe you want to give us some insights before it on the topic, what we're going to learn from you.
Yeah, definitely. So the talk will be focused around trusted execution environments, and we're going to dive into what they are, all of the things basically that you need to configure to get one up and running, different providers that are out there, and then we'll take a look at some use cases and demos.
All right, Liz, looking very much forward to this talk, and I would say without further ado, the stage is all yours.
Okay, great. Hey, everyone. My name is Liz, and I'm really excited to be here with you today at the Security Day. We're going to talk a little bit about trusted execution environments, which are a part of confidential computing. So I am a developer advocate. I work for an encryption API company called Evervault, and I am personally a big believer in this technology, and we are there as well. So if you ever have any questions about it, feel free to find me on Twitter, Mastodon, email, classic, and happy to like have a chat or just learn more about what you're building and what you're thinking about in terms of security. So if you could right now grab your phone and open up your favorite browser or ChatGPT and type in data breach, latest data breach, most recent data breach, anything like that, and give it a search. And I want you to look at some of the results that come up, because if your results are like mine were, I was looking through them and I was just blown away at the number of huge tech companies that are dealing with data breaches. I think sometimes working in security, maybe we assume that these big players are immune or they've got it figured out. But one of the ones that really surprised me actually was ChatGPT showed up. I think they had a breach in March, and there was a period of time where other customers or participants could see data about other people, their names, part of their credit card, emails, things like that. So even the most exciting technology of today is dealing with this type of thing. And also, no shade to ChatGPT, because I definitely used it a lot when I was making sure I had everything right when it came to talking about things like trusted platform modules. So it just goes to show that really this is something that we're all going to have to deal with, right? If we work in tech, none of us are immune, and most of the time it's a question of when, not if. And I think it also begs the question of, like, will data breaches ever end? Like, will we ever see, the end of this? But I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future, but there is an emerging technology that does have the potential to really reduce the amount and the scope of these breaches. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. This technology is also in your hand right now. If you take a look at your phone, there is a part of your phone. It's a secure, hardened, separate part of your phone that's a trusted execution environment. And if you have an Apple or a Samsung, it's definitely in there. And if you ever do anything like use biometric data to open up your phone, or if you have payments set up, all of those processes are happening in this separate part of your phone called a trusted execution environment. And that way, if you ever lose it, if anybody ever tries to hack it, there's really no way that they're going to be able to get access to that data. So even if you aren't familiar with the terminology, you have definitely already used it before. The Confidential Computing Consortium is the sort of governing body, part of the Linux Foundation that's really pushing this technology forward. And so this is the definition that they use for confidential computing, which is all based around this particular piece of hardware, which is the TEE, or the Trusted Execution Environment. You'll probably hear me say that 90 times today. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about what TEEs are. We're going to talk about why they're actually useful with protecting data that's in use. And then we'll take a look at some use cases. So some generic use cases of how it can be applied, but then also some demos of how you could implement it. We'll wrap up with a few challenges and limitations, because as great as it is, there still are some things to be mindful of, and with some tools and some resources in case you're interested in learning about this more after this ends. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what exactly is a TEE. So a TEE is a separate secure enclave within a device or a CPU. And when you run a process in a TEE, nothing can be touched within it. No person, no administrator, no one can get into it. This is because, in addition to being a separate part of the hardware, it's also using embedded encryption keys and mechanisms to ensure that the keys are only accessible and authorized by the application code itself. So if anyone were to try to change the code, do anything, tamper with it, it would just immediately shut down the process of connecting and it wouldn't go through. So to kind of give you an idea of what the architecture of this actually looks like, this is the architecture of where it's running in an Apple phone. So you can see how there's the separate part of the enclave, and you can see where there's the key management that's happening between the AES engine. So it's doing a bunch of verification before it sends in any of the data. And don't worry, because we're going to go way deep into what that process looks like later on. So I think to understand why this technology is important, it's helpful to think about the history of it and how we got here. So when we think about protecting data, there's three states of data that we are thinking about. There's data at rest, in transit, and data in use. And the main way that we can protect all of this is by encrypting it. And encryption is basically where you take a piece of plain text data, you use a cryptographic algorithm, and you turn it into ciphertext. And you have to use a particular key in order to encrypt the data, and a particular key in order to decrypt the data. So we've actually been able to encrypt data at rest and data in transit for quite some time. You can do this by either using application encryption, you can use encryption at the database level, And then if you're transporting data over something like TLS, then it is going to be secure. However, data in use is not something that we've been able to really protect very well. Data that's running in memory, in RAM, CPU caches, and this is an exciting advancement because this is actually a place where a lot of cyber attacks do tend to happen. Data is vulnerable when it's in use, and aside from there being, potentially data that has personally identifiable information or some sort of sensitive records, there's also things in memory like encryption keys and session keys and credentials and things like that. I know everybody was talking about credentials, so that might be high up on your list of things to think about at the moment. But memory isolation is something that has been introduced by confidential computing. And so if you keep everything encrypted in other states and you utilize a TEE on top of that, oh no, I'm so sorry. There's an alarm going off in my building. Hopefully it's not too loud. I'm going to keep going unless I hear from somebody that it's interfering with the audio. Anyway, okay, it stopped. So there was this other concept that was used in terms of protecting things on the hardware level called the rings of protection. And sort of in this model, you can keep things in ring 0 and 1 heavily protected. So where the OS kernel runs, so it's the most privileged ring. You don't want anyone touching that. But things that are in ring 3, that's the application code. So it's fine. Anybody can touch that. So this was all well and good until cloud providers came and large-scale virtualization happened. And being able to securely protect remote computing became a lot harder because it was harder to trust the code when it's running on different machines. There's other infrastructure running, and you just can't really verify what might be going on. It's back again. So the value of TEs is that it allows you to reduce the trust that you have in these different parts of the system. The way that it does that is by allowing you to isolate the high privilege code. So the code that you want to run, rather than it being a high privileged sort of administration level, it's the code that's actually the high privilege aspect of it and the data. So you can ensure that it's only going to go to this one particular area and not be seen by anyone else. The other thing is that it really reduces the amount of trust and any potential exposure that it might have to any of those other people that are a part of the software supply chain. So you might be thinking this because I definitely thought it at one point myself. We talk about these trusted things, but don't we have to actually trust this provider? Don't we actually have to trust this hardware? And there's kind of two pieces to this. And one is that trusted doesn't actually automatically mean secure, right? It is part of your security strategy, but it can't be everything. The other part is that when we talk about trustworthiness, in this case, it's really rooted to the extent possible of formal verification of cryptographic measurements, which can mathematically prove that your system and its components are behaving as expected. So it really all boils down to we are trusting that these cryptographic proofs are working as intended and that they are making sure that everything that we're sending into the system is what we want to send into it. So there are a couple of things that have to be sort of a part of your architecture and your processes if you want to be running a TEE. This is outlined by the Confidential Computing Consortium, but it's also just kind of like an industry-wide thing that everyone's agreed on. The first one is data confidentiality. So unauthorized users and entities shouldn't be able to get access to the sensitive data. They shouldn't be able to learn the runtime content, the secret keys, anything happening in the code control flow. The second one is that there needs to be data and code integrity. So this means that once something's running inside the TEE, it can't be modified. And if it is modified, there has to be some detection there so that you can automatically shut the process down and stop it from running. And this just ensures that the code and the data can't be tampered with. And the last piece, which we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about, is attestation. And attestation is a process that provides proof to the remote party that the environment has not been tampered with. So in this case, if you were going to put together some code in a container and run it, you would be the remote party, and you would want to be able to run that attestation process, and it would go through a verification process, and then you would know based on all the measurements that came back that what you ran was what you actually deployed. There's a few other concepts that are helpful to kind of be aware of when you're looking into confidential computing and trusted execution environments. The first one is the root of trust. So this is really all of the hardware, software, and firmware that are providing the basis of your trusted design. So one of the most important parts of the root of trust is the trusted platform module. So this is something that's separate from the TEE. The TPM is not the same thing as the TEE, but it is used in tandem because this is where where your I'm sorry, that alarm is so annoying, and I really, really apologize. I'm not sure what's going on up there. But we'll talk about a little bit about what the trusted platform module is in just a minute. The trusted compute base is all of the system components that are critical to making sure that security is maintained as your system is running. So these could be the kernel, the microkernel, some of the system utilities, and just ensuring that your system stays secure. But this isn't the basis of the security, if that makes sense. The trusted platform module is a chip that is a secure crypto processor, and it will do things like limit the use of cryptographic keys, generate the cryptographic keys, and also store them. And so you can use all of those keys to authenticate your hardware and your software. So now we're going to talk about attestation, which is a really important keystone of everything that you do with a TEE. The attestation process allows you to fully assert the trustworthiness of the hardware and the software environment that your workload is going to run in. So regardless of the security posture of the underlying infrastructure that you're providing, if you have attestation and it's set up properly, then you can trust that everything is as you intend it to be. The attestation process involves running a computing processor that generates cryptographic evidence for a workload running environment. So the workload owner can remotely verify the evidence once you get it and decide if the workload's execution environment is trustworthy or not. So this is usually in the form of like a hash or something we'll look at later called PCRs, things like that. So if that all looks correct, you can provide a set of secrets, a certificate, the container image that you want to run, and then you're able to run the workload. So Mike Purcell is a very prominent voice in this. Oh, is everything okay? Okay. I really am so sorry about this alarm. So without attestation, you're not really doing confidential computing. You need to have the attestation as a part of this. There are a number of different ways to approach attestation. It's very complicated. There is a working group from the engineering task force, the Internet Engineering Task Force. They call themselves RATs, Remote Attestation Procedures. And they've outlined a bunch of different ways that you can approach attestation. And they're really working hard at standardizing that. So we won't look at all of the examples today, but we'll just look at one in particular. And if you're interested in learning more, you can look those up. The one that we'll take a look at is the background check model. So this is named the background check model because it functions very similarly to the process that you would go through if you were actually getting a background check yourself. So in this example, the attester, which is presumably you and your code running on a device, VM, a workload environment, needs to be attested by a relaying party. So it's going to start out by sending data like a certificate. And once that's sent off, it will be provisioned back with a secret encryption key from a key management service. Then this evidence is sent cryptographically, signed with a key, and once you receive it back from the verifying service, you can use your security posture as the attester to verify that everything that's coming back, which is usually like the measurements, configuration, is matching with what you have. Once this is verified, then you can go ahead and start sending data into the enclave. So containers get more confusing when this is an example of an attestation process for if you were using the Kata containers on Kubernetes. So as you can see, you start out again sending the evidence in step 1 to the key broker service. The key broker service goes off to the attestation service. While that's happening, you get the key management service to go back to the key broker service. Then you send all of that back to the enclave agent. Then you can check all of your images. And then, finally, once it's all attested, you can start sending things to your containers. We are going to look more closely at one from Amazon. Amazon has an offering called Nitro Enclaves, and I think they do a really nice job of outlining sort of what the process looks like for Nitro Enclaves. With Nitro Enclaves, you can deploy a Docker container into a trusted execution environment, and they have a verified, attestation process that they basically mandate that anybody uses their service run through. But when I was kind of going through all of these different attestation processes, I thought that this one was kind of the most clear. So hopefully you can kind of like follow along with the diagrams here as I'm sort of explaining what's happening step by step. So in this example, you have encrypted data that's in an S3 bucket or a data lake. And again, that's important because in order for TEs to be fully useful, you want to make sure that the data that you have is encrypted and protected in the other states as well, not just when it's running in the enclave. So first, you are going to send an encrypted data key that's stored in Amazon's key management service. And then you'll initiate the build process by creating an enclave image file. The data in the key will go through the parent instance. The parent instance won't see it, and it will go through a secure local channel into the enclave. At the same time, the enclave will make another call to receive the attestation document that's signed by the Nitro hypervisor. The attestation document has all the information about the enclave, the cryptographic measurements, and Enclaves uses what's called platform configuration registers, which is abbreviated as PCRs. So in this example, also, they are using the key management service provided by Amazon. So it integrates really nicely. And I haven't used the other ones for the cloud providers, but I would assume that they also integrate quite nicely if you just want to use their key management service that they already have. So in the next step here, the enclave will send the attestation document and the encrypted data key to the key management service. The key management service will verify the attestation document against the preset key policy, and it's going to check for the hashes to see if they match. And if they do match, then it will reveal the secret to the encrypted data key and it will decrypt it. If it doesn't match, the key management service will not decrypt the key, and so your data will remain secure. The process will just terminate. So right after decrypting data key, the key management services will re-encrypt the data key with the enclave's public key. The decrypted data key will get encrypted with the enclave's public key, and then it will get sent back. And then in the final process of this, the enclave will receive the re-encrypted data key with its public key. It'll check the public key against the private key and then decrypt that. This is when you can finally start sending plain text data into the enclave and everything is fully attested and ready to go. I spent a lot of time thinking about a good analogy for a trusted execution environment, and it was not easy to think of a suitable one. And I apologize in advance if I'm offending any vegans. Please think of this example as being putting vegan stuff into the sausage machine. But I think that a TE is like a sausage machine, and this is why. If you think about a sausage machine, you take a bunch of materials that you want to go in, and you put it in there, and you don't really know what's happening. You're just trusting the machine to do something. Something's happening in there that we don't really know. So in this example, your code is kind of like the materials that you put in. You probably may need to go to a butcher who's like our verification service and say, you know, I want to send all of this stuff into the machine. He might ask you, or she might ask you, like, what is it? Why should I let you put it in there? What are you using it for? Are you going to pay me money? I don't know, whatever a butcher might ask you. And once you agree on that, once you say, like, I'm going to pay you money, I'm going to come back at, you know, 9 a.m. tomorrow to get it, then we can go ahead and put all the materials inside the machine. And then if all goes well, you get solid responses, good attestation measurements, and your code and your data will be running in the CE, and you'll have a nice packaged final result of what you wanted. So one thing to note is that key management is incredibly important. As you saw in that example, there are so many parts of the process where you need to access keys, encrypt, decrypt keys. So you really should be using a solid key management system. Again, it's fine if you don't want to use the one that your provider offers, unless they mandate that. But just be sure that you're following key management best practices. OWASP has a lot of helpful guidelines around this. Make sure you're securely generating them, storing them, rotating them, all of that. And one thing that I think is really great about this technology is that it is very flexible. So in that example sort of that we walked through, you can take a Docker container and then you can just deploy it into an enclave. There's really not much else you need to do because it does handle that whole attestation process for you. So there's a lot of flexibility, and that wasn't always the case, right? Like there used to be, if you did all of this on the hardware yourself, there wasn't all that flexibility of using the programming languages and tool chains you wanted. But this was said by Richard Searle from Fortanix, who also has a lot of really great insights into this industry as well. We won't spend a ton of time talking about hardware and software and sort of abstractions, but we will touch on it briefly just so you have an idea of sort of who some of the players are in the space, and if you do decide to explore it more, maybe good starting points for where you would want to look. There are a number of hardware providers that have been around for a while. There is ARM. TrustZone is their TE that runs in Samsung phones. This is interesting because they actually divide their entire computing stack into secure world and insecure or non-secure world. There are some projects that have been built on top of ARM to actually turn the secure world into separate little multiplexes of independent user enclaves. The other one that you may hear come up quite a bit is Intel's SGX. So this uses an isolated virtual address space to execute portions of user-level code. Memory in SGX is backed by encrypted RAM, so that's like another good line of protection. AMD, they have entire virtual machines that they isolate from an untrusted hypervisor. And they also have support for encrypted memory operations based on keys that you keep in the memory controller. NVIDIA, I just added, which is why the logo is also not a good one. I just realized it's not the transparent version. Sorry, NVIDIA, if you see this. But one thing that's really exciting is they recently announced their NVIDIA Hopper for confidential computing platform, which lets you use Tensor Core GPUs for AI workloads. So you actually could train an AI model using confidential trusted execution environments if you wanted to go that route. I think they're still kind of early days with it, but really cool technology. And then the last one here is RISC-V, which is actually an open hardware platform. Lots of interesting things being built on it, especially in research and academia. So clouds and containers. probably recognize everybody on this slide. No surprises here. And again, there are more. These are just kind of ones that were a good starting point to mention. We talked a little bit about Nitro enclaves already. You, again, can build in deploy Docker containers, Docker images into the trusted execution environments there. And it's actually built on top of EC2. So if you already are running something in EC2, you can allocate part of that over to using Nitro enclaves. Azure has confidential VMs that allow you to choose which hardware you want to run on. And they also have confidential containers that you can deploy using Kubernetes. Google has confidential nodes. Interestingly, they also have kind of like use case specific products that you can use for processing big data and also for multi-party collaboration, which we'll talk more about as a use case in just a little bit. Abstractions and services, there are so many of them, which is amazing to see. It's really awesome to see so many people in this space, both people that are doing things in open source and people that are building, proprietary tooling. Edgeless Systems has been around for a long time. I think they were really one of like the first big players in the space. EverVault, where I work, we use this, and Kate Privacy does something very similar to what we do as well. Skyflow and Juna. So a lot of these providers take some of the extra difficulty out of the deployment process. There's like little difficulty parts of the tasks, attestation tasks. Some providers, for instance, like Amazon, it's actually quite hard to deploy to Nitro enclaves if you're not running Linux. So if you're a developer that doesn't run a Linux machine, something like this could be a good option for you. There's also a number of great open source projects that are going on, many that are supported by the Confidential Computing Consortium. Enarc's on here is you can build with WebAssembly and key. I forgot the name of that one. The blue round one, that is built on, sorry, I forgot the name of it. That's built on RISC-V, and it's particularly cool. I think there hasn't been a lot of work on it recently, but it's a really interesting project. So let's take a look at some use cases, because hopefully you kind of understand now that it's a separate part of the processor. It's hardened, no one can get into it. So what does that actually mean? Why would we actually want to use that? The most obvious case is probably processing personally identifiable information. So any type of data, credit card data, social security numbers, any sort of, sensitive data, especially as it pertains to something like financial data, where you may need to have regulatory compliance and things like that. So for some companies that are thinking this way and need to be mindful of those types of things, actually utilizing a TEE can immediately solve a bunch of your compliance issues. Another one is keys and credentials. So you can use this to, hide all of your keys and credentials, encrypt them rather, and then decrypt them when they come into the TEE. And so, that will ensure if you accidentally committed an encrypted string to a GitHub repository or, a version control, they couldn't do anything with it. So in a way, that's actually quite useful, because you could pretty much do anything with any of those encrypted strings, and nothing bad would really happen, and you could just decrypt them in the TEE. Another case is tokenizing or masking data. So you can actually use the TEE to tokenize the data. You can send it into the TEE and go ahead and turn it into tokens, and then restore it afterward. And then if you need to run any operations again on the data later down the line, you just do it again in the TEE. Of course, like, this could be absolutely not performant, very high latency, it could be maybe not a great choice. It's not good in every particular situation, but it is an option. It's available. The other use case that I think is pretty popular right now and very exciting is ML models. So maybe you want to run inference on a model, but you don't want that model to be available publicly. Maybe you want to run it on data that is sensitive in some way. Medical data is a pretty great example, and that's something that we'll look at in a minute. And then, as mentioned, there's also now sort of more opportunities to potentially even train data in TEs. I have kind of a fun anecdote for protecting IP because I think there's a lot of obvious cases for IP that you would want to protect, but I came across one recently that was a little bit weirder and more interesting than one I'd heard of in a while. And I was chatting with somebody who is a writer for TV and movies, and they were telling me that the process to basically disseminate all of the IP about a particular show or movie is actually very, very complex because they don't want anything leaking about these shows or these movies, particularly, like the really big budget ones. And you may have seen a couple of years back, there was like a pretty big breach at Sony. So when they get scripts, there's like watermarks all over them with your name on it. And if you lose it, it's a really big deal. There's just all kinds of things that happen with the potential of losing this very protected, very important IP. So I think we'll probably see a lot more of these types of cases begin to bubble up once people have sort of more access to utilizing trusted execution environments and realizing that this can solve a lot of the problems that they might face. This last one is one that I think everyone in the industry is incredibly excited about. And again, I think this will have very far-reaching effects. Multi-party collaboration is really huge because there's so many cases where potentially we want to solve a really big problem in medicine or a really big problem in the public sector, but different companies or different governments, they don't want to share the data. They don't want to share their algorithms. So if there was a place where we could run all of these operations and get whatever information we wanted out of it without actually having to expose the data or the algorithms to each other is really powerful. So I'm excited to see what will come of this particular case in the years to come. I'm not really an expert in this area, so if you ask me a question about it after, I probably won't give you a great answer, but you can use this for blockchain use cases as well. So using it to validate historical data and associated smart contracts when you're doing different operations in the blockchain. So let's take a look at a demo. So this is a demo that one of my colleagues put together that I thought was really cool. And basically it's built around this data set and this model on brain MRI segmentations. So trying to use it to determine if a particular part of a brain scan might have a tumor or something serious in it. So the steps to running this were to build the app in a Docker container, deploy it to Nitro enclaves. Once that was running, we can upload a sample image of a file, that sample image that we just looked at there. We were saving the model in S3. So we get the model. Once it's in the enclave, we can run it against the image and then get a resulting image that has a highlighted area of where there could potentially be a tumor. So this is the code for the application where we're getting the model out of S3. And then this is the part where we're, running it against the model and then getting the output image at the end. This is the Docker file. And so it's, pretty basic, pretty simple. And I think that's the nice thing to Richard's point. Ideally, you should be able to kind of run your processes as you normally would and just deploy it into an enclave as a part of your development process. So I'll show you something really quick here. This is the code that you use to upload the sample image. So then it will kick off the process in the cage, do the comparison, and then send you back the image there. When you deploy this, when you start that attestation process, it will send back the PCR values, which are those cryptographic measurements that you need to compare against. And so like in the way that we have it set up, it will actually inject it into the TOML file so you can get them there. The other bit of this that is really nice is you can set up, different things that you want to come back from the enclave. You can ask it for specific information. You can also add in a timer if you want, just to check for latency to see how long it's taking to run. So that's why that's in there. And then you get the image back at the end. So this is what it looks like after it's run. This is also another good example of where you might want to do a multi-party collaboration. I think the use case fit here is very much like protected IP and protected models, but say you wanted to actually aggregate a bunch of data from different providers and run it through, that's one way that you could use this. The other demo that I'm going to show is around trusted lending. This one's quite simple, but I basically wanted to show that there is a world in which you can use trusted execution environments in applications that you've already built and things that you already have running, and just take the piece that requires the protected computation and just put it in that way. So for this, we have this scenario where we want to fill out a mortgage application. We want to send it off to the lender. And then the lender is going to do a credit check and all these different kinds of, checks to make sure that we may or may not be qualified for it. So all of that will happen in the enclave. And then once that happens, we'll get notified at the end and let us know whether we are qualified for it or not. So if I go over here, I have this running, and this is, it's just a really simple form, nothing fancy. But one thing that I wanted to show is that you can encrypt all of the fields, coming in. So however you want to do it, you can use a proxy to do that. You can use sort of like application field level encryption. Oh, sorry, I thought this was going to pop up easier. So here's our application form. And again, once I hit apply, it'll go off to the cage, do a credit check, do other checks that it needs to do. And you'll see here, if you look over in the logs, I've just consoled out the different fields here. So it's actually encrypting all of the PII that we are submitting here, and it's encrypting the file as well. So once it's done the check, it should send me an email if it's working properly. It might take a minute. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is just to show that it's also possible to, go ahead and forward it to a different API, have it decrypt the fields only when it hits that API, and then you're really keeping everything safe throughout the entire process that you have here. So the challenges that come with using trusted execution environments. Obviously, I've been singing its praises, but there are some challenges and limitations. There are still some functionality gaps, and there's a guy who's the head of security architecture at JP Morgan, who's been really advocating for trusted execution environments for decades. He is just has really good insights in this area, so I definitely recommend checking out things that he's written if this is something that interests you. But he talks a lot about how there are still these functionality gaps and tooling gaps, and oftentimes if there are companies, organizations that want to lift and shift and sort of change part of their architecture to include using a trusted execution environment, there still can be lots of problems because actually verifying that there's a continuous end-to-end protection for these confidential workloads can be, very challenging. So we're still figuring it out. There's no perfect process for it, but I think that people are seeing the value in it now, and they are choosing to make those choices and make those changes. The other big one is performance. So if you've ever had to deal with encryption before in any capacity, there's going to probably be a performance hit in some way, especially if you're relying mostly on application level encryption. This can cause, some latency issues. the hardware aspect of trusted execution environments has made immense strides. Even just since like 2018, 2019, they've really improved their performance with a lot of them. Of course, this also depends on, how much data that you're processing. But many of the cloud providers are also really making it a priority to focus on latency and give you options for, if you are, for instance, running something on EC2, how much you want to move that over to Nitro enclaves and provide the resources for that to use there. So again, still in process, but getting better. And the last one is kind of a big one. I think for a lot of people, it's still pretty expensive, but the hope here is that it will get less costly with further innovation. And if it does become, an expected standard from regulators that are asking for it in industries like banking and healthcare, that it will become more affordable and ubiquitous. And, it wouldn't be prudent to chat with a security audience without talking about risks. There definitely are still risks. Side channels is a big one. So you can still, potentially reveal secret information in the computer system, particularly in that process of sending something off to the trusted execution environment. There's, a possibility that they can gather more indirect data. And this is particularly an issue on the hardware side of things. And it can be a little bit more difficult to figure that out than it would be in a classical threat model. The other one is incorrect implementations. So again, like going back to what I think Mike said about attestation, it's really important to configure everything correctly. And if you do implement something in the wrong way, then it's kind of like, well, I don't know, like you're kind of like not getting any of the benefits necessarily. Like it's not necessarily better than nothing if it's implemented incorrectly. And then, people are always going to be clever. There's always going to be, malicious folks out there. TEs are just one measure against these attacks. It's definitely not a fix-all, catch-all solution, but hopefully it is something that can be helpful in your overall security strategy. So there is a lot of hope for the future of trusted execution environments and confidential computing. It's I think something that people want to see used ubiquitously, like not just for a special purpose, not just for sensitive workloads. I think there's many folks that envision that it will one day be broadly used, much like cloud services are today. Many leaders also think that confidential computing will be blended with other privacy methods like fully homomorphic encryption, federated learning, differential privacy, and other forms of multi-party computing. In this session, we learned, quite a bit about trusted execution environments, looked at a few use cases and examples. There are so many good ones out there too. If you poke around at the confidential computing consortium's projects, a lot of them have really great demos as well. We talked about some of the challenges and some of the hopes for the future. And, while it's a relatively new privacy tool, I think its ability to protect code and provide those cryptographic guarantees is a really big deal, and it's really interesting. So they can be used by any developer, and that's the other sort of great part of them at this point, is that it's not just reserved for people that have sort of a specialized knowledge. It's something that you can spin up today and can try it out, and I really hope that you will. So if you want to learn more, a lot of my resources that I mentioned today are up on my website in a giant dump of links. So there's a couple of really nice papers in there, a few videos that I think would be helpful if you want to learn more, and some other content. So that is it for me. Thanks again for bearing with those alarms and everything else. You can find me online. You can find me on my email, and I really would love to hear from you. So just reach out.
Liz, hello again. Thanks so much for the awesome talk and also for giving us an possible outlook on a possible brighter future with confidential computing. So we still got some minutes left, and I would say we use them for short Q&A. Maybe also to you as a first question, you're a developer advocate. Maybe you want to give us some insight in how your interest in tech started and how you got to the point where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like so many people my age are interest in tech started with like making MySpace layouts, and I am one of them. Yeah, I think it started really when I was a teenager and just wanted to like make custom HTML for different like little places I lived on the internet. Yeah, I ended up doing a coding boot camp. I was kind of working more on like the content side of things prior to that. Did some writing and was working as a software engineer for about 4 years. And then I decided to try out DevRel. I kind of missed some of the aspects of my previous work, but I really do love coding and technology. And so it was a really nice sort of Venn diagram intersection of the two. Yeah, I was doing DevRel at Twilio for a couple of years and then came to Evervault. And it's such a very, I don't know, it's a very interesting field. It's a very interesting time. And I think because I'm kind of at this like intersection of like developer tooling, but for security, there's a lot of really fun problems to solve. And I, have dealt with a lot of like vulnerability issues when I was working as a software engineer, and any chance to sort of like help some developers solve those and make their lives easier is like totally aligned with what I want to do.
Right, yeah, fun problems. I think that's the right mindset when it comes to coding. Phrasing it like that. You didn't mention it now, but I read in your bio something about a mouse as a boss. What's up with that? If you could give us, enlighten us on that.
I completely forgot I put that in my bio. I was being very cheeky when I wrote that, I guess. Yeah, I worked at Disney for 5 years. So I was a software engineer there.
And you met the Mickey Mouse, the big boss.
The Mickey Mouse, yeah. Which was honestly, it was such a, I mean, I worked on like infrastructure tooling. It wasn't the most exciting or like sexy work, but having the, I guess, so really fun, interesting technology, like things to do at the parks and graphics and do for like Lucasfilms and Marvel movies and things like that. It was a really, really fun place to work in tech.
I can imagine. Okay, thanks for also clarifying that one. And now let's jump to some of the more technical questions, as we got some from the audience. As a first one, maybe a bit of a broader, but do you have some examples of successful implementations of confidential computing in healthcare and fintech use cases? Or maybe let's broaden this a bit up as a general successful implementations.
Yeah, there actually is one. I don't know if I am able to mention them by name, but there's actually kind of an interesting one that's an overlap. So it's a company and they have a credit card that allows you to gain points from different sort of like health conscious choices that you make. And so they have, this whole system that they've worked out. Basically, when people sign up and opt in, there's like a point system and that kind of thing. But I think one really stands out because it's kind of a weird combination of the two. I don't know the ins and outs of the specifics of it, but I know that like JP Morgan is a really big advocate of this technology and they use it quite a bit in a lot of their in their architecture. Yeah, I think, I would say in terms of the healthcare cases, private healthcare companies have been using this. I think that there is a world in which more of like public healthcare, cases like global nonprofits, things like that, where that could be used. especially because of the multi-party computing accessibility that we have now. But I think at this point in time, it's still something that like, at least from what I've seen, like a lot of like haven't been touching. But if of one where they have, I would actually like to hear about it. So so do let me know.
We will. Thank you so much for answering that, Liz. We got some more questions. Next one would be, how does confidential computing fit into an overall data security strategy, and what other technologies should organizations be considering?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that just overall, knowing your attack vectors, like having threat models for different areas of your system is really important. Having pen testing, going through sort of all of those like basic security measures is really important because again, this is kind of like an extra new thing. It shouldn't be a stand-in for like good just security practices. But I also do think that there are situations in which maybe teams aren't able to have a whole security team, or they're kind of like they're a small startup and they're just getting going. And I think those situations where maybe you don't have the robustness of having a very security focused team to solve these problems for you. I think one of the good ways to handle it is just by encrypting as much as you can. And I'm obviously very biased when I say that, so take it with a grain of salt. But I do think that by encrypting the data that could potentially be sensitive, whatever that means for your customers, whatever, or the users that you have of your application, just making sure that you protect that data. And then, of course, there's like also the regulatory and the compliance pieces of that. And I guess that's kind of like a separate thing. But yeah, I would say that, don't use this as a substitute for your security strategy. Have a really strong one. And if you aren't sure what that looks like, there's like a ton of really incredible folks. OWASP has a lot of really wonderful resources as well. If you're, again, like kind of doing it on your own, trying to figure it out. I've recently found because I'm kind of like new in the space myself, the B-sides groups are really great. And so if you're like if you're coming at it from an educational standpoint, doing something like that to get more information could be really good. And yeah, I think just knowing where your data is going, like at the end of the day, like knowing where your data is living, knowing like where it might be accidentally ending up, like is it ending up in like a dumped log somewhere that you forgot about? Just things like that are really good to pay attention to.
But yeah, thanks for that answer as well, and thanks also for sharing more resources. I think that's also very valuable always to our live day attendees. And yeah, you already gave us an outlook on a maybe brighter future, but more specifically, what does the future of confidential computing look like, and how do you see it evolving in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like for me, it's been a big wait and see. I think that people are really excited about it. I was actually very excited about like the NVIDIA announcement. I'm really like hoping that people take advantage of that and utilize that because I want to see what will come out of it. I don't know. I think for me, I'm a little bit skeptical, if I'm being honest, like not because I don't think it's great. I obviously do, but I think that it's one of those things where people and organizations sometimes I think will be like, oh, like we'll just take the hit. We'll just, figure it out after. And I think that, and I'm hoping, more people, especially in our industry, especially in like spaces like this, we care about security, we care about data privacy. We don't just want to do it because it's regulated or it's mandated, but we want to do it because it's the right thing to do. Because, we value our own personal privacy and freedom as well as those of those that we're building things for. So I think from that side of things, I am hopeful that there's enough people that are like that and that are working in tech that, want to see this change, want to see data breaches end, don't want people to have to deal with the complexities of all of the things that can happen when, their identities are stolen or their money is stolen and things of that nature. So yeah, I guess that's a bit of a complicated answer. But I think on the developer tooling side of it, I'm very bullish. I'm very hopeful. I think especially because I've been, playing around with, obviously what we do, what other companies are doing. And there just is so much that can be used from a developer experience standpoint. It's really so amazing to see, because I have never actually deployed something myself to hardware, so I'm not claiming that. But when I'm just like reading through like how people went about that and all of the things that they needed to do, it was just so specialized. And now you can just like run it in Kubernetes or run it in Docker. It's pretty amazing how far it's come.
Right. Thanks for giving us insight in this also, Liz. And maybe as a last question for the Q&A, the obligatory AI question. At the beginning, you talked about data breaches. What's your opinion on AI in cybersecurity? Is it more harm than blessing?
Oh, wow. What a good question. Okay, so my personal beliefs is that like AI is really exciting. I think it has a lot of potential. I think I'm probably stealing something from, I think it's Dan Miesler or something. He runs this newsletter called Unsupervised Learning. But he was talking about how one of the risks that might happen is, as we're able to put together applications more easily using AI, kind of these sort of like tools that now exist where you can like piece every little thing together, or of course, like also just ask it to write your code and generate the code for you and cobble that together. There is, the chance that people will just be building things so quickly using these tools that they won't be thinking about the security implications of them. And that is definitely scary because you can think of all of the terrible things that could go wrong when we're just like excited to ship stuff and we're not really thinking about what's on the other end of that and what could happen. We're not, testing it. We're not doing, sort of these practices that we've found in sort of traditional software development lifecycle is really important. So I think it's just a matter of, having that, being open to the advancement and the speed at which it's happening, but also keeping in mind that there does need to be some level of risk assessment, and not like risk assessment in like stopping AI, but risk assessment in like making sure that we're not just sacrificing security at the hand of building things faster.
What wise words to close the session. Liz, thank you so much for your amazing talk and for the Q&A. Hope you have a nice rest of the day and hopefully see you soon on another live day.
Thank you so much, Benedict. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz. Bye. All right, and before we jump to the last topic of the day, just a 20-second break.
Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
And now to the final talk of the day and to the final speaker. He's researcher at SPA Research. He focuses more on the web application security testing and developed combinatorial testing approaches for SQLI in web applications. Last but certainly not least, welcome Johan.
Thank you. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, so First of all, thank you to WeAreDevelopers for having this chance to present this project here. As said, my name is Jovan Zvanovic. I'm part of the Matrice group at SBA Research in Vienna. And the topic today I'm presenting is on reverse vending machine exploits. This was a project that I did with my colleagues Manuel Leitner and my supervisor Dimitris Zimos. So first of all, preliminary reverse vending machines, just to clarify, are those machines that you oftentimes see in supermarkets where you can refund or return empty glass bottles, sometimes also plastic bottles and cans. Okay, so the outline for this talk is first I want to give you the motivation, why we look into this topic, why we think it's an interesting topic, and why security considerations are important here. Next, I want to go into more of the details. How do these RVMs work? How do they detect bottles? And also, what is the process? I'm sure most of you already know it, but just to be sure. Next, I want to present you some interesting attacks that have been happening in the past that are publicized either in academia or in the newspapers. And then we present the exploit that we discovered and tested, followed by the reaction of the supermarket chain after disclosing this vulnerability to them. And before concluding the talk, I want to quickly take you to another European country and take a quick look at their reverse vending infrastructure and to see if there are some similarities that we have. Okay, so why is this topic interesting? Obviously, generally, all topics that have some financial aspects to them are always interesting in the security domain, as if in case there is a broken process or some vulnerability, this could potentially lead to huge losses or free money for the attackers. Another important reason here is also that Austria announced to extend the existing reverse vending machine infrastructure to include machines for plastic bottles and for cans, similarly to what is already the case in Germany, as far as I know. And obviously, the biggest motivation, if there is free money, you can get free Club Mate, and that's all the motivation that you should need as a researcher. Okay, so how does the process look like? I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but just let's go quickly through it. So in the first step, arrow number 1, we have our empty glass bottles that we want to return. We take them to the machine, we insert them into the machine. After inserting all bottles and the machine has calculated the price or the refund money, let's call it, you press a button and you get a printed out receipt from the machine with the total of cash that you're getting for the returned bottles. In the third step, we go to the cashier with this receipt, and in the fourth step, either we, in some cases, you can exchange the receipt for actual cash, or in some other instances, you have to deduce the amount of refund money that you would have from your purchase total. So it simply removes this amount from your what you have to pay. So now, how does the machine differentiate between accepted bottles and bottles that you should not accept? Well, in the, let's call it in the easiest case, you simply have a barcode scanner. So you can imagine I have a machine where I put the bottle in and there is a camera, probably from above, and it simply checks the barcode with a table or a white list of accepted barcodes. And if it's inside, it's accepted. If not, it's rejected. This is the simplest way to make such a machine. We also have some machines that are, I believe, only using barcode detectors or scanners in Vienna in some stores. Usually they have only an input for bottles and not for crates or kegs. And usually the place where you put the bottle, it's simply on 2 cylinders that start rotating when you put the bottle inside in order to turn the bottle to find the barcode for the camera. Yeah. So on the other end of the, let's call it engineering effort spectrum, you have the material detection, which would be some sort of infrared spectrography to create a spectrogram of materials that are used in the bottle, and then match this possibly to known accepted spectrograms. As I said, this is much more implementation effort, and rather, I would say I haven't seen many of these. Okay, then next we also can use shape detection. Sometimes you have a camera that simply films the bottle and tries to either template match or use some other methodology to approximate if the given bottle matches the accepted shape of bottles that can be returned there. And in some cases, you could also do this with, I don't know, machine learning model behind the camera that is trained on some accepted shapes, or you could also simply have template shapes that are matched. And you have also oftentimes weight sensors inside of these machines. The reason is that in many cases, the machines are located inside of the store, in the back with the alcohol and other bottles. And the weight sensor is an important feature for the machine to differentiate between empty and full bottles. Otherwise, you could simply go into the store, take all the beer bottles and return them and get free money. Yeah. So yes, these are generally the most commonly used sensors or approaches to detect a bottle. And in most cases, you have a combination of multiple of these inside the machine. For example, a weight sensor, barcode scanner, and shape detector, for example. Okay, if we now know the process and know how the machine works, how can we attack the machine? How can we get the big money? Well, we categorized the attacks that we found into 3 different categories. I'm presenting now the first category, the inside attacks, or also machine manipulation category. This is the category where generally you need, let's call it, privileged access to the machine. Such attacks usually change the configuration of the machine or interfere with the intended processing pipeline of the machine. For example, what do I mean with that? For example, there has been a case where 2 employees in Germany simply changed the machine in order not to shred plastic bottles after they are submitted. Machines oftentimes shred these plastics in order to simply be able to compact them more and store more amount of plastics. But these 2 employees disabled this feature or simply circumvented and collected all these intact plastic bottles, and in the after closing hours simply threw them again into the machine and collected apparently over 100k euros for that. Yeah, this is the most common sort of attack, I would say, that you see in the media. Usually some employees that change the intended way of the machine working. Next, we have attacks that go for the bottle acceptance system. With this, we mean that the goal of this attack is to make the machine accept something that is not a bottle, that it should not accept. For example, as stated here, the easiest case is if you only have a barcode scanner. This only scans is the barcode there, and this is the correct barcode. And you could, for example, take empty paper, toilet paper rolls, stick a barcode on them, and throw this into the machine and get it accepted and get the money for the supposedly returned bottles. Another example of this attack would be, for example, let's say I am somewhere where we don't have a reverse vending machine infrastructure, and I simply collect plastic bottles and then go somewhere where I can return those plastic bottles and simply replace their barcodes with accepted barcodes, and thus get the not local bottles into my refund system. Yeah. And the last category of attacks are the attacks against the bottle classification system. Those are, let's call them, more of the avant-garde attacks. Those are rather not that common. And again, if only a barcode scanner is used, this is rather simple to achieve. The goal is, however, to get the accepted object to be more worth than it actually is. What do I mean with that? For example, I think in Austria, when you return a beer bottle, you get 9 cents for the beer bottle. But if you return a bottle of lemonade, you get 29 cents for some reason. And an example of this attack would be to make the machine believe that the beer bottle that I entered is actually not a beer bottle, but rather a lemonade bottle or something like that. Generally, I try to get more money for the object that I'm inserting into a machine. Okay, so these are most of the attacks that we found in the newspapers and in the academia. Now we want to present the exploit that we found. And we were thinking, okay, you have many different attacks that you can, or approaches that you can misuse this machine. What about the receipts? Is there an important information on the receipts that you can manipulate or abuse? So in order to test this and evaluate this, we simply chose 3 supermarket chains in Vienna. And over the next, I think, probably 2 weeks or something like that, we simply returned empty bottles to various store locations at various times, throughout the 2 weeks, in order to get, let's say, the biggest entropy possible of receipts, the biggest variation inside the receipts, to know whether the store location or maybe the date or time, current time, influences the barcode. So we collected these for 3 different chains, and we'll go now quickly over them. I have here the receipts for store 1 and store 2. I made a little typo here. It's actually store 2. So if we take a look, we see that these two stores produce rather similar looking receipts. Generally, except of this listing of returned items, which is here a little bit different, they look almost identical. So if we take a closer look to these receipts, we can see that generally they have a static part at the front, which is here marked in green with the green rectangles, followed by a dynamic part, which is the blue rectangle. And then at the end, you have also a static part. So for example, in the 2 receipts on the top from store 1, you have this big green static part that's always the same. You have those 2 digits that change. It could be potentially more, but those in this example, it's only 2 digits that change. And you have the postfix after those blue digits that are also fixed, or rather dependent on the amount of bottles you return. Okay, and for store 2, it's basically the same. You have a shorter green static prefix, followed by a blue variable part. And different to the first store, you here have a part where data from the receipt is actually stored inside of the barcode. Like you see that receipt number is part of the barcode. And after this receipt number, you also have, again, the static part behind, or this part changes depending on how many bottles you return. But if I return 2 bottles at 2 occasions, this part behind will always be the same. Okay, so having this data, we decided that the receipts from these 2 stores look very similar, but they also look somewhat dynamic. And given the fact that they contain the number of the receipt, the receipt ID, our assumption was that this is probably used to look up whether the receipt is correct, or if it has been forged in some way and is actually validated at the checkout when you use the receipt. So we said, okay, let's leave it at the side. Maybe we have more luck with the next store. So for the next store, we also collected some receipts And I think you can rather quickly see, independent of date or time, the barcode is identical. The whole barcode is static. So what does that mean? For us, the first question was, okay, if it's always static, what stops me from taking this barcode and copying it, or taking the receipt and copying it and using this? How would the cashier or the system know that this is a forged or not a barcode, not a receipt that was issued by the machine? So we thought, okay, maybe there is a replay attack possible. Okay, but in order to abuse this, we don't want to simply take a 9-cent. Like here, we don't want to take these 9-cent receipts and copy them and cut them out and submit a bag full of 9-cent receipts. We would like to control the amount of money that we get back. So for this, we went to another store or to another machine and gave it 2 bottles instead of 1 bag. And then we compared the receipt that has 2 bottles and the receipt that has 1 bottle. And after comparing, we see, again, we have this big static code. We have here 2 digits that change, and we have a random digit at the end. And if you make the comparison, you see, okay, I have here 18 cents on my receipt as the amount of money that I'm getting, and the 18 is also here in the barcode. And the same thing is with the 9 cent. So the assumption was, okay, this is probably simply the money that we get back. But what is the last digit? So in order to figure this out, we took a look at the whole receipt, went over it again. Is there anything else that we need to look into? Address? No. Barcode? Yes. Timestamp? No. Everything else is useless. Only the barcode is the most important part. Okay, let's take a look at it. The barcode is a YAN 13 barcode, which is a standard, I think, mostly used by supermarkets or some sort of resellers that have to generate receipts. It consists of 13 digits, which is structured as follows. The first 2 digits are the country code, which is 22, should be, if I remember correctly, Austria, or it's a reserved keyword, but it is the country, followed by 5 digits manufacturer code. This is usually also, this also stays the same on the receipts, since, let's say I'm supermarket chain A, I also own this store and this store, so I am the manufacturer, so it stays the same. Next, we have 5 digits of product code, which is used for the amount of money that you get back. And the last randomly changing digit was simply a checksum. So knowing all this, knowing how the barcode is structured, knowing that there is no visible or obvious way how you would differentiate between generated barcodes and actually issued barcodes by the store, we thought, is there something that's really stopping me from printing my own barcodes and using them? There is not. You can actually print your own barcodes. You can, in the end, make something that's called barcode forgery. We have created a simple script to show this. So we use one of those small portable thermal printers, I think they're called. It's simply a receipt printer that we control over USB, and we have a small actually PHP script that we wrote for generating these barcodes. And when I execute the script and enter my root password, I get a new receipt which follows the same, which has the same barcode format, which looks basically identical. I of course changed the actual store name to something different for legal reasons, but yeah, you can print these receipts. And we also tested it out in one store with the permission, of course, if the cash system would simply accept it, which did work. We were able to purchase 1 bottle of Club Mate with a self-printed receipt. And doing this all now, Looking back, it makes more sense. For those of you who maybe used already such receipts at the checkout, you often see those cashiers blacking out the barcode with some edding or some other pen. And this is the reason why, because you could simply reuse them and reuse them and reuse them. Okay. Of course, after we confirmed that this vulnerability existed, we first contacted the manufacturer of these machines that we tested. And they were kind enough to respond back to us and make a meeting. And they said that their machines have the possibility to be secured, and they also provide this function. But if you are a company that buys machines from them, those reverse vending machines, you have to actually also buy the secure solution. You have to opt in and say, yeah, I want to pay more for the secure version that is not simply forgeable. I will present in a bit what the secure version is. First, I want also to add that after speaking to a manufacturer, we also spoke to the specific supermarket chain that employed these vulnerable reverse vending machines. And I mean, we got the same answer that you would expect from a bigger company. It's a classic, we know, we are aware of this issue. We decided to use the insecure version because of reasons, and there is probably no one that will exploit it and will switch in the future. Yeah. So yeah, there are probably still some stores, or rather many stores, that still are prone to this attack. Also, what I want to add is after finding the exploit, we went again through the research, through the literature to find if there are similar reports, and we found this Danish paper where they tested the reverse vending machine in some Danish supermarkets and also found similar vulnerabilities. It was actually also the same manufacturer, if I remember correctly. They found similar vulnerabilities, but they also found additional vulnerabilities due to the higher amount of different models, reverse vending machine models used. Yeah, we only saw approximately 3 different models in Vienna, and yeah, they're all the same. So let's take a quickly look at another European country where they also have a big reverse vending machine infrastructure. I'm talking about Finland, Helsinki, where recycling is rather important and rather big. Everyone does it. And you also see everywhere these reverse vending machines. So, of course, my first question was, is it also vulnerable to the same thing? So returning some bottles and collecting some receipts, and I see, okay, yeah, it looks identical. It is the same Jan 13 code. It is actually the same manufacturer, and it is the same, the same layout for the receipt that we have in Austria. Only the supermarket logo is exchanged. But yeah, they're also vulnerable to the same attack. But there is more. When I was there, I also saw that they have plastic bottles that have these stickers that indicate you can return this bottle and you get 10 cents for it. But there were also bottles that were imported that had stickers on them over the actual barcode on the bottle. And my assumption is that they stick these custom stickers over the original sticker in order to make it work with their existing infrastructure, like the barcode scanners at the cash register and also their reverse vending machine. And they simply created probably a custom barcode that simply means this is worth 20 cents, because you see the left bottle, the green bottle, is 20 cents worth, and the right bottle is only 10 cents worth. So the next question obviously is, what happens if I stick the 20-cent code over the 10-cent code? Do I get the double money? Do I get like 20 cents for a bottle that's 10 cents worth? And what happens if I put in the bottle that's 20 cents worth without the sticker? So after testing it out, you get no money back if you put in the imported bottle without the custom barcode. However, the originally 10-cent worth bottle is now 20 cents worth if you put the special barcode over it. So you could simply print out this 20-cent barcode, stick it on all your 10-cent bottles, and you have a 2x instant money doubling. Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about vulnerabilities and how you can misuse these machines. How can you secure them? Well, it's rather simple. Many of these manufacturers provide a cloud solution, which usually looks the following. So in the first step, when the machine generates this receipt, it generates a dynamic receipt. It generates maybe also a ID that is unique to this receipt. And it stores the data in some data storage. In order to, at step 3, when we use the receipt at the cash register can simply make a request to validate if the given receipt is inside of the data store, and if the amount that is on the receipt is the same that is in the data store. And if yes, we have a valid receipt that was issued by the machine, and we simply accept it and delete the existing entry from our data store now, since it has been used. Or if it does not appear inside the database, then it probably has been forged or it is not issued by the machine. Yeah. So what can we learn from this talk? Buy the secure setup from the beginning, especially later when you have many store locations. Exchanging the whole infrastructure costs probably a lot of money. And only because people don't abuse the vulnerability doesn't mean that in the future there won't be people that abuse it. And also, don't use receipts. They're a waste of paper. Yeah. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm very happy to hear them.
Jovan, hello again. Thank you so much for giving us insights on this awesome topic. And yeah, I would say let's jump into a quick Q&A also. And also to you the question, do you remember how your interest in tech started and how you got there where you are now, like your developer journey?
Mostly through very enthusiastic IT teachers in high school, and also through security CTFs. Like we have the Austrian Cybersecurity Challenge, which was, I think, what really got me into the topic of security and IT.
All right, thank you. Then more to the technical questions regarding your talk. What role do emerging technologies such as blockchain and IoT play in improving RVM security?
It is an interesting aspect. You could technically, when I was talking now about the mitigation, I said you need simply a data store. And of course, you could use blockchain simply to store all these generated receipts in a way that is not manipulatable, and simply add transactions to a database when the receipt is used.
Okay, thanks for that answer, Jovan. Next question. How can security researchers and industry professionals work together to identify and address RVM vulnerabilities?
Okay, so I think what we need to increase is definitely the, the focus that we put on security right from the start of the project. So adding security at a later stage, or thinking, okay, yeah, I will improve my software quality by now going over security issues in my project or taking them now into consideration, is a possible road, but it often leads to things that are that stay hidden, bugs or vulnerabilities that are then abused at later stage. I think having someone that is, that handles this topic inside of the project, that overlooks the whole project, is important to have someone like this, some sort of security expert, or person
Okay,
that
yeah,
takes
thanks for that.
these things into consideration.
Yeah, like the guy, the go-to guy for things like this. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And also probably having pen tests or some sort of someone that is not part of my development team take a look into my code, into my project, someone who's unbiased, who simply looks over it.
The famous second pair of eyes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Then let's go on to the next question. This is a really interesting topic. Do you think we can apply this technology to also other use cases in the future?
What do you mean exactly? The vulnerability or the mitigation, or?
He didn't specify, but maybe in the meantime, if you to give him time to answer another question, you already talked about some of the ethical implications. But as the question also came up from the community, are there any ethical implications related to RVM security? So maybe we can dig a bit deeper into this topic. Do you have something more to share regarding this, or
the ethical aspects of
yes,
RVM?
the ethical. Yes.
I mean, abusing this vulnerability is, I would say it's looked down upon, because I mean, reverse vending machines are there for a good reason, to simply recycle your waste. And abusing this system to get profit for yourself is, you know what I mean, is not the nicest thing to do. But still, how do I say, there could be people that would do this. So taking a look into your current security and being sure that it's secure, or knowing that at least it's insecure in this terms, is important.
So even if the system gets abused, it's not the baddest thing that can happen. To
Yeah, I mean,
if you
abusing such a system is really low. Let's say it like that. But it's still a security issue. It could still lead to a financial loss. Yeah, it should be addressed.
All right. Okay, thank you for that answer as well. The person from before specified he meant the mitigation part. Or let me reread the whole question. Do you think we can apply this technology to also other use cases in the future? And he meant the mitigation part.
I think so. For example, you could think of stuff like, what could you think about? Maybe stuff like processes where you get some sort of receipt or token. For example, if you think about, how do I call it? Parking garages. If you think maybe about parking garages, instead of printing those whole receipts, which potentially are vulnerable, don't know, have to look into them, you could simply also create an entry of the starting time when the parking was reserved in some sort of data store, and simply generate the difference of entries when you exit the garage. Like, take this timestamp, take the timestamp that I know that I created, that I stored in my database, that's not manipulated, and simply use this, for example.
Okay, yeah, great idea. So, park garage operators.
It's also this project is also in the pipeline. So.
Okay. Then maybe for the
Stay
next
excited.
live event.
Yeah, stay
where
excited
you can
for
tell us a
part
bit more about it. Perfect. Then, John, we have one more question. And you talked a bit about the vulnerabilities of this. And the question is, how can RVM manufacturers and operators mitigate these vulnerabilities? Are there some effective ways?
As I said, on the part of the manufacturers, this vulnerability that we now presented is already mitigate it. They have the solution for this, but you as a company, you as a customer, have to buy it. You have to opt in and to say, yeah, I will spend the extra money for the secure solution. And all the other attacks that we discussed are, well, some of them, like, what was it? The one attack where you could simply, instead of bottles, use paper rolls, toilet paper rolls. Yeah, in this case, in such cases, you simply need to opt in for a better detection rate, not only rely on the barcode scanner. And also, yeah, some sort of pen test or security audit of these machines would be nice. But for the attacks, like I said in the beginning, the inside attacks, that is difficult for the machine manufacturer to prevent, since you are assuming that the people that work in this supermarket are to be trusted and are operating in the, how do you say, in the opinion or in the direction that the supermarket would.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Would be good to assume it in every company, but yeah, sadly, it's not always the case. But okay, okay. This was the last question from the audience, Jovan. Maybe do you have something more to add? As we have some more minutes left.
I only have to say, stay excited for park garages hacking, and yeah, that's mostly it. Looking forward to the next session.
Yes, then we will talk about this in the next session. Then until then, Jovan, and have a nice rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. All right. And now that also this live day slowly but surely comes to an end, don't forget to go to worldcongress.dev to claim the early bird tickets, as we have a countdown that runs out in 2 days, and also get more information on some speakers that we already announced, like the Romeros, for example. Also, thanks so much to our partners who makes events like this possible. Scroll down on the live page. We listed them as clickable logos. Click through them, leave them some love on their sites. They really deserve it. And also thanks to you, the audience, for making these events as awesome as they are. Thanks so much for engaging with us, and hopefully see you on the next day on May 10th, where it's all about the student life. Stay tuned. Bye.
Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.